Can I welcome members, invited guests and the public, both here and watching on the webcast, to today's meeting of the Environment Committee. Today's meeting will principally be a question and answer session with the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy to discuss the Mayor of London's programmes and commitments in relation to air pollution, green infrastructure, waste and incineration and energy for Londoners, which I think we've just seen a press release about. We will hear from the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, Shirley Rodrigues, welcome, and officers from the GLA, and we encourage everyone to take part in the discussion on social media using the hashtags Assembly Environment, Assembly Env and Environ Q&A. We have a few short items of formal business to go through first of all. So please can I first of all make sure that everyone's electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any unnecessary interruptions during the morning. And do we have any apologies?
No apologies have been received, Chair. Thank
you. And can I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 24th of July 2019 as a correct record? Thank you very much. And can I ask the committee to note the completed and outstanding actions from previous meetings? Noted. And can I ask the committee to note the action taken by me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree an output from the 24th of July 2019 meeting on Heathrow Airport and air pollution in London? Noted. Thank you. So that now brings us to today's main item, a question and answer session with the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy to discuss the Mayor of London's programmes and commitments in relation to air pollution, green infrastructure, waste and incineration and energy for Londoners. So can I first welcome Shirley Rodrigues, who is Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy. And the officers are going to move in and out as we go through the morning, but first of all, can we welcome James Hardy, who is the Senior Manager for Energy for Londoners, and I'll just mention the other people who will be joining you, Shirley, now. So we have on Waste and Incineration, we'll be welcoming Andrew Dunwoody, Policy and Programmes Manager for Waste and the Green Economy. On air pollution and the Ultra-Low Emission Zone, we will be welcoming Oliver Lord, who is the Deputy Air Quality Manager. And on green infrastructure, we'll be welcoming Andrew Jones, who is the Policy and Programmes Manager for green infrastructure. Let's move all of this over, sorry. So, this week where we have the climate strike on Friday, it's really good timing to be having a meeting to look at, all the work that is being done on behalf of the Mayor of London to address climate change and to check how the Mayor is doing on each of these programmes. Now, your press release this morning about Energy for Londoners has kind of preempted some of our questions, because we were going to be finding out when Energy for Londoners was actually going to make an appearance, having been asking questions about it for a while. I think, the first thing, and I have literally only just seen the press release, what is the timeline for the new energy company to become operational?
So, very happy to be here to answer the questions. I was asked to prepare a statement, so just to give you a quick update. So, do you mind if
that's
I do that?
Absolutely fine. Go for your statement. That would be very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And since I was with you all just over 6 months ago, the Mayor and I have continued to make excellent progress on our plans to make London greener, cleaner, and healthier. And I'm just going to share a few highlights with you today. So firstly, on air quality, we're helping clean up London's dangerously polluted air. And on the 8th of April, the Mayor introduced the world-leading Ultra-Low Emission Zone in central London. And it's already having a significant impact. On an average day in July 2019 compared to March 2019, we're seeing some 12,500 fewer, older, more polluting vehicles detected in the zone during congestion hours, which is a reduction of over a third. And in its first month of operation, there was around a 20% reduction in NO2 concentrations since people started preparing for the T-charge and ULEZ in February 2017. To help Londoners prepare for the ULEZ, we've launched a £23 million van scrappage scheme for micro-businesses, sole traders and charities, and a new £25 million scrappage scheme will follow later this year to support low-income Londoners and people with disabilities. We've continued to clean up our buses, and we've delivered all 12 of our low-emission bus zones routes a year ahead of schedule, and in doing so, cutting bus-related NOx emissions by an average of 90% along some of the capital's most polluted routes. We're making 2 of London's double-decker bus routes exclusively electric, as the capital's electric bus fleet becomes the largest in Europe. And in total, we've now retrofitted over 3,200 buses, putting us well on track to make the whole of London a low-emission bus zone in 2020. To help get even more cleaner electric vehicles on London's streets, in June, the Mayor launched the London Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Delivery Plan, which includes plans for rapid charging hubs, as well as a new pan-London coordination body led by London councils that's going to help facilitate charge point installations in the boroughs. Since 2016, the Mayor has supported the delivery of over 200 rapid charge points and over 1,500 innovative lamppost chargers. The Mayor continues to oppose the expansion of Heathrow Airport, and through his challenges, he has secured a requirement that meeting air quality legal limits is the reddest of red lines for the third runway. And on climate change, the Mayor is also making progress. In July, we held the first ever London Climate Action Week, bringing together Londoners and our climate hub of businesses, experts and NGOs at over 150 events, focused on scaling up and increasing the speed of climate solutions. We estimate nearly 20,000 people took part in official events, and the week resulted in a number of commitments, including, for example, key organisations in the hospitality sector committing to the Mayor's zero carbon and waste targets. And today, we've announced that in December, we'll be launching London Power, a new energy company available exclusively for Londoners. It will offer consumers fairer tariffs for electricity and gas, which will always be within the cheapest 10% of comparable tariffs available in the market, even when their fixed tariff ends. The electricity it supplies will also be 100% renewable. This is in addition to the progress we continue to make to tackle fuel poverty and retrofit our buildings, including installing energy efficiency measures in nearly 1,000 fuel poor homes, providing over 2,500 households with fuel poverty advice and referrals, and we've been installing solar panels on hundreds of homes and supporting community groups to develop solar projects. On greening, we've made huge strides in making London greener, and the capital was designated as the world's first national park city this summer. And to mark that achievement, we held our first National Park City Festival with over 300 free events taking place across London's green spaces, wildlife habitats, green roofs and waterways. And our Greener City Fund continues to fund tree planting and greener space creation and improvements. The Mayor has now directly funded the planting of over 175,000 trees, more than the previous Mayor funded over his 2 terms. And finally, on waste, we're continuing to encourage and support boroughs to cut waste and increase their recycling rates, particularly through a requirement to collect the 6 main recyclables and separately food waste collections. To date, we've approved 14 Waste Authority contracts to be in general conformity with the London Environment Strategy and are supporting all boroughs to produce reduction and recycling plans. The Mayor's made it very clear that London doesn't require further incineration capacity if London's waste and recycling targets are met, and he continues to oppose the application to the national government to construct a new incinerator in Bexley. We've been helping Londoners cut their waste, particularly by ditching the ubiquitous single-use plastic bottles. We've already installed over 40 water fountains, so people can easily refill reusable bottles on the go, and we'll be installing many more over the coming months and years. And this is on top of the 2,500 now refill points across the capital. So I'm sure all members of the committee will agree that this is great progress. The Mayor and I want to thank the Environment team and other teams at the GLA and the functional bodies that have been helping us deliver this, all our partners, and especially Londoners who are helping us deliver such significant progress to make London greener, cleaner and healthier. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all of that. So, heading back to look at energy for Londoners, what is the? I mean, it's it is very, very good to see an energy company for London, and good to see that it's all renewable energy. What is the timeline for the company to become operational?
So we have been talking to the company, because after the contract is signed, there is a period of mobilisation. So we're, and that means, getting the contact centre ready with the details of our particular offer, making sure the staff are all trained, getting the website and the marketing up ready so that people can register, and then, we start to attract customers. But we're aiming for a launch in December this year.
Okay, and yes, what's the kind of, because I'm obviously getting, how many people do you need to sign up for the project to be viable and to work?
Well, we think it's such a great offer. We want all Londoners to sign up. It's focused at domestic householders. That's over 3 million households in London, 3.4 I think. It is a good deal. Obviously, it's for people to look at and choose and compare. But we've worked very hard to make sure that the rate that we're offering, we think a unique approach, which is to guarantee that the rate will always be within the 10% of the cheapest, so that people have comfort that when they lock on, and particularly when they roll over. So when the tariff ends, often what happens is the companies put them onto a standard variable tariff, which is much higher, and you're sort of locked in. And what we know is that people don't switch. Many people don't switch, so they sort of carry on paying very high tariffs when they don't need to. So the offer that we have is going to make sure that people roll over on the cheapest comparable tariff, and that gives peace of mind. They can still look around, they can still switch, but they don't have to they're just not locked in.
And how do you think you're going to get over that inertia of people about switching? Have you got sort of big plans for?
So we already have advice on our website that tells people how to switch. Talk to organisations like the CAB who give advice. We have the boroughs who work on the big energy switch. So there's lots of advice out there already. There's sort of commercial organisations and so on. But I think what we're focusing on is making sure that the tariff is the best way, because we know that even with all that advice, even with what Ofgem has been doing with the energy cap, we have lots of advice out there telling people it's good to switch. People don't. There's an inertia there, and partly it's to do with people's time. People don't have really time to look at new rates. They want something to be made easy for them, or it's very complicated. And what we're trying to do is avoid, not do what some of the big six and some companies have done, and that sort of, I think what James calls the tease and squeeze, and really make sure that people are always rolled over onto the cheapest comparable tariff, so that way, that's the way that we can start to help people.
And just to add to that, over 60% of customers don't switch, or have only switched once in their lifetime. So, switching levels are...
So it's a big challenge, isn't it?
London is one of the lowest switching levels within the UK, but it is on the rise, and that's as a result of there being increased competition in the market, and there being a bit of a spotlight on this market. But that allows us to actually, play our good hand with the offer that we've brokered with Octopus, to be able to get those that rarely switch or have never switched, and make sure that they get the good deal.
And are you going to be wanting to broaden the supply to start serving the non-domestic sector as well as the domestic sector?
I think at the moment we're focused on the domestic sector. This is the first time that London has got a London-wide energy company run with through a municipality, at London-wide level. So we want to make sure this is right. It's a commercial enterprise. We've got to get all Londoners aware of it. What we're doing through our other work on Energy for Londoners, and James maybe can just run you through some of the work that we're doing, is what we're looking at supporting non-domestic supply for the moment. And then obviously, we'll always keep these things under review, but our first focus is getting London Power up and running, launched later this year, and giving good service and a good tariff out there.
Yeah. And just finally for me, before I think a couple of other people want to come in terms of monitoring the uptake, what are you going to be doing? Getting all Londoners to switch to London Energy, that's a big, ambitious thing to be trying to do. how are you actually going to be? Are you working with boroughs? Because the boroughs have got the kind of access to people through council tax and things like that. I mean, how are you actually going to reach people?
So we'll be doing a lot of work. You know, this is as you point out, the mayor doesn't have, you know, housing, so doesn't have access to tenants or residents. You know, we don't issue poll tax, council tax bills, so we don't have that direct relationship. So what we have to do is work with partners. So particularly, we've been talking to the local authorities to say how can we promote and work with you to promote this offer, which will really help people who are struggling to pay their bills, that, you know, go to the local authorities. We've been talking to housing associations because we've created a what we call a voids service. So when a resident leaves a home, or when they build a new home, the housing association has to connect to an electricity company, and we want that to be ours. So we've created a sort of framework so that this service is offered to the boroughs, or housing associations, so that they can look at this offer alongside others and then choose. We think our offer is so good that you know that they will pick us. So I think those are a couple of things that we've been doing, and obviously we've been talking to NGOs and others about the offer. Now that we're able to talk about the offer, because we've signed the contract and announced the partnership, we're now able to go out and talk about this in much more detail, and that's the work that we'll be doing over this mobilisation period and beyond launch.
And what about boroughs like Islington, who've set up Angelic Energy? How, because London Energy and Angelic Energy are kind of pretty, you know, they're sort of similar things, trying to make sure people have access to affordable energy. So have you got some kind of special relationship with Islington? What's going to happen? You know, the Islington residents are going to have these two offers coming at them.
Other boroughs are available, by the way. You know, there are 31 other boroughs apart from Islington.
Yeah, but I'm just aware that Islington has set up an energy company.
And Hackney is due to launch the Hackney and East energy company.
Well, the difference is this is a London-wide offer, so and we believe our offer is a very good offer. So essentially, it's for consumers to choose, just like any other company going entrant into the energy market. It's for customers to look at the offer and decide what's best for them. So, I mean, obviously, we've been talking to the boroughs, so they know that, you know, we've been talking about this for a while now, so they know that we've been preparing this, and Islington chose to go ahead, you know, for, you know, to help their residents, and that's fine. But I think, you know, when it comes down to it, I think people will look and compare the offers and decide what's best for them.
Okay, thank you. Leonie wanted to come in, and then Sean, and then David, and then
Thank you. Well, I think it's going to be of great interest to many people in boroughs beyond Islington and Hackney, where the local authorities have not made efforts to set up their own energy companies in this way, and certainly in my patch in Merton and Wandsworth we haven't got that, so I'm sure that will be of interest. But you were talking about working with local authorities and housing associations. You touched very briefly on NGOs. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was the London Community Energy Fund in general, because we've now had 3 rounds of that, and that's mainly gone towards feasibilities, but a lot of the community energy providers, as well as having money for feasibilities and then doing installs, but a lot of them have been running energy cafes, recycling some of the savings into running energy cafes, and they've been working intensively with people on switching in many cases. Okay. And I wondered, is there likely to be, I presume you're going to be assessing the impact of the first 3 rounds of the London Community Energy Fund, which of course London has had to introduce because the government cancelled the Urban Community Energy Fund, which is a real shame. And I wondered, I mean, I asked the Mayor about this in a recent, I've been asking him regularly about this in MQs, but I just wondered if you could say whether or not you would be giving any funding for energy cafes, because I think that's a really good way to get people to switch to London Power, or other facilities are available, obviously.
I think I'd be really interested to know a little bit more about how that works, but we've got a Community Energy Fund. What page are we on now? Yeah, so we have the 400,000 Community Energy Fund that's already helping over 31 community projects. And the third phase was launched earlier this year, so the 1st of July, so we're just currently assessing applications. So unfortunately that round is closed, so it's too late to look at that. But I think just send me some details and let's have a conversation about how that might help, because I think what we want to know, and really the conversation we're having with boroughs and others, is to understand how do we best get to the people who really need help. And we know that an email out from the mayor is going to be one way, but it's not going to cover everything we know. So we want to work with faith groups and others about getting this message out.
I think it's peer-to-peer conversations about switching that the community energy groups have found particularly. I mean, I ought to probably do a declaration and say that I'm a member of CREW, Community Renewable Energy Wandsworth. CREW, not me that's been running them, but have been running energy cafes in housing estates where people are really impoverished. But also holding them in libraries, Wimbledon Library, which isn't actually in an area of major deprivation particularly, and people have been coming in with their bills, and then they've just been talking to people about how to switch and actually making it happen. And I wondered whether it would be worth getting some of the people from some of the community energy groups to talk through the switching process with some of your. I can see James is nodding. I think that would be a really good way to get people on board at an early stage, because Caroline's point about viability. Just in terms of the overall picture, if I can just move on to any conversations that, as I said, London Community Energy Fund was replacing the government's cancelled Urban Community Energy Fund. We had the coalition government's Green Deal, which frankly was, as far as Londoners was concerned, a complete failure, actually pretty much nationally. London didn't really get very much out of eco. We're moving towards the winter months, and I know the Mayor's been working on this, and it's great to see London Power launched, but are we getting anything out of government to sort of top this up in terms of delivery around improvements on insulation? Because it's all very well getting people to switch to tackle fuel poverty, but actually insulating their homes through Green Deal and Eco, which didn't really happen. Is the government giving any positive noises on that?
Not that I'm aware of, which is unfortunate. So the government have adopted a zero carbon by 2050 target nationally, and it's absolutely clear from the CCC reports, from our own analysis in London, that you're not able to do that without retrofitting, the millions of homes there are around the country, let alone in London. What we've been trying to do, what the Mayor has been trying to do through setting up the Energy for Londoners programmes around energy efficiency, the Warmer Homes service, for example, our retrofits, is not only helping to tackle carbon, but particularly helping people in fuel poverty through insulation programmes. Our 1.5 degree action plan estimated, the order of magnitude of investment that was needed in the billions. If you're looking to retrofit all of Londoners' homes, but we're not getting any of that. We've lobbied very hard to get an increase on how much eco is spent in London, and again, not really getting anywhere with that either. We have managed to get very small concessions about widening the eligibility of eco, so that we're able to, on a London-wide basis, incorporate more people. So people with disabilities and sort of other categories are now sort of eligible for that. Obviously through London Power now, we'll be able to seek to use some of their funding on energy efficiency as well, and I'll let James talk about that. But one of the problems has been that the companies have not wanted to invest in London, and this is a familiar story because they say it's too difficult. And it's easy to go and work in other areas, and this is something that we've been lobbying very hard on a number of fronts, government to change, to require a proportion of the funding to be spent here, as they do, for example, in Scotland, in order to make sure that Londoners get their fair share. What they're putting in, they're getting out as well.
Okay, and obviously one of the things that we've done is we've used EU funding very successfully to help with tackling fuel poverty. Now obviously that may be coming to an end quite soon, actually, on the 31st of October, or there may be some sort of transitional period. Is that something that your team has been preparing for when that ends?
Yes, so we've done an analysis, and I have that in my paper somewhere, but a lot of our programmes have been had the benefit of EU funding, and that has been really helpful in trialling projects, trialling new innovations, and then using them as the basis for rollout, also for lobbying government to make changes. That has been really incredibly helpful. As part of the sort of Brexit conversation, this is one of the things that the Mayor went to government and others have said, will you guarantee, the continuation of this sort of source of funding? And that's what they've said. So, so on the face of it, the government will re-provide funding, but obviously we've still got to get that, we don't quite know
so the
where we are.
government funding will replace it. Well, that's good to hear. You mentioned...
well, the funding will be available. Whether we get it replaced in London is another matter.
So for new schemes that we're yet to launch and we're currently mobilising, like the Renew Successor programme, which is technical assistance programme helping to support social housing providers, that money is committed. So the government, as Shirley said, will honour Europe's commitment to providing us with that money should a post-Brexit scenario play out where there is limited European funding coming to the UK.
Which obviously, if we decide that we're going to withhold the 39 billion and so on and so forth. Can I just ask you about Renew and how many retrofits? I mean, that was due to come to the end in April 2019, and I think you last year were telling me that there had been 4,000 homes that had been retrofitted, and that would save around 3,700 tonnes of CO2 per annum. And I just wondered if you could update us on whether that figure has increased, both in numbers of homes retrofitted, and obviously that tackles fuel poverty directly. Is there going to be a sort of successor programme to Renew that is going to be run through Energy for Londoners?
There will be a successor programme, and that's just in development at the moment. Phase 3 of the Renew programme met all its European investment targets, and that supported the retrofit of 39,800 homes and saving circa 34,600 tonnes of CO2 per annum. That's over the life of the
So
programme.
that was since 2014. I would say that's 26,800 within the mayoral term alone. So that is really quite significant. We are extending Renew, but the success will be very different. What we've learned from Renew is that you have to probably do fewer homes and do them better. We need to show people what good looks like. Okay, we're trying to make homes 2050 ready, or even to be standing still in 2050 in the same way that they're retrofitted today. So this is about quality, and it's about getting it right and setting an example. It's about working with supply chains to make sure that they are ready to take on, a commercial, what will need to be a commercial enterprise to make homes fully, zero carbon. So while we are, building on Renew, we are also changing our approach. It's not just about innovation. We need to be able to deliver, good benefits to people out there, but we also need to trial and test new technologies that will be commercially, rolled out later.
So you're talking about technical specialists. Is that a service that you're going to be supplying to, for example, housing associations and councils? Is that part of the successor programme that's being developed?
It will be very similar to the current Renew programme, with intensive end-to-end support, helping social housing and boroughs work through all the design, development, procurement, and successfully deliver, those different stages to get projects on the ground and built and retrofitted.
We have butt in here.
What else to say? How will we target it? And it needs to be targeted as well.
Yeah. I just say, so that's part of the issue, and then obviously the Mayor's £500 million Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund in terms of the availability then to finance those projects, that's available. So what we're trying to do, and this is a model for government in terms of what we absolutely need to really retrofit at pace to meet the climate emergency, is a model of that end-to-end support linked to financing that has to be rapidly rolled out and scaled up. So we have a model in London that really works. We know it works. As James was saying, the lesson that we're learning is that that approach works, but we also have to go deeper if we're going to get the sort of emissions reductions that we need.
One of the things that came up in our coal damp mouldy homes report, where there were two sort of key learnings. One was that overcrowding makes damp and condensation worse, and the real importance of ventilation and having active ventilation. And the other issue is actually focusing on the overcrowded homes first, and also making sure that new build insulation is done in such a way that will cope if those homes become overcrowded in the future. And I just wondered if you've picked up on those recommendations in our report, in your thinking going forward on all of this.
Yeah, so we obviously read the report with interest.
Just on the retrofitting for a moment before going to new build, we have looked at that very closely, and that's exactly why the Mayor's Warmer Homes programme is structured very carefully around the interventions that we put in. For example, we want to mitigate against things like damp, thermal bridging, poor internal air quality. So that's why if we install, for example, cavity wall insulation, we know that can lead to thermal bridging. So what we do is we install ventilation along with it. We will not put cavity wall insulation without ventilation. That's an example on retrofit, and that will really serve the occupants well in the future. On new build, the London Plan has a whole plethora of requirements to mitigate against overheating.
I should be absolutely clear, I wasn't talking about new build at all, because some of the stuff in the London Plan I feel confident is going to bring us back towards where we were several years ago, until the coalition government scrapped the code for sustainable homes, and we're going to go back to that, which we need to, clearly.
Lenny, have you got more
Finished.
questions? You've
No, I'm
finished.
finished.
Excellent, because I have got Sean and David who are wanting to come in. So, Sean, did you...
Just a quick couple of rapid fire. This is a rapid fire round. Morning to you, Shirley and James. Just a quick thing, Shirley. Our chair asked you how many customers the new company would need to be viable, and I don't feel like you really gave a number there. Could we have one?
Well, because the contract is a commercial in confidence contract, so we can't give you the sort of numbers that we're aiming for, because then that way you can retrofit and work out what the commission is and so on. So I think at the moment what we're saying is that we have an ambition to make sure that all Londoners are aware of the offer, and that we want as many Londoners as possible to sign up.
I must give up. We'll come back to that. My colleagues suggest you could at least give us a ballpark figure, some idea of the scale we're talking about here.
We've looked at a range of scenarios, but this is a new venture, and the market is very competitive. It moves around quite a lot. It really comes down to the offer. So I'd bring you back to the fact that this is, has enduring competitiveness. It will have a price that is very, very competitive. It will be green. It's also about giving back. This is 100% renewable electricity. It's also about reinvestment in any profits that the Mayor makes back into the community, so to deliver social and environmental goals. So, not only will London Power customers benefit economically themselves through the good and fair price that they get, but they'll also be economically benefiting London as a whole and their own communities.
Is it any cheaper than I could already achieve though? Could you say this thing about 10% within 10% of the best price? So technically I could shop around and get a better price?
I can tell you that it will be in the order compared to what else is out there at the moment
again,
in the market. It will be about £200 saving for an average London household.
So the point of this is that people don't shop around. So James has already talked about the switching, but if you do shop around and you find a cheaper deal, the conversations we've had, the polling and the sort of discussions we've had with stakeholders and Londoners is people look at not just the cheapest price, they look at service, and Octopus have got an excellent track record. They're the only which energy supplier recommended. They've only got that designation. They look at the other offers that the company offers and the sort of ethos, that they offer. So it's not always the cheapest. And then, and what happens is if people do look at the cheapest and they go in for a year, then they don't switch and they're rolled over onto the very highest tariff. So over time, they're actually paying more. 60% of people don't switch. And
that they're always rolled onto a tariff. Or that?
For most companies, yes.
Industry practice is generally you are teased in, to use the earlier phrase, to a 12-month fair tariff. But you need to be very careful, because once you move over that 12-month period, like any utility, you can be put onto a standard variable tariff, and then you will be subject to a price hike, which is quite significant. It could even outweigh the savings that you've made in that 12-month period, and we don't want that to happen. So this is about protecting. This is about taking the burden of having to frequently switch away from the consumer and building it in the offer from day one.
I get that, and I think if there's any benefit here, that may be one of them. The next thing is it actually any easier to switch? Because if we're talking about switching being the big thing, and it sounds like that's the case, can Energy for London do something significant about making it easier to switch?
So Octopus have got a very good service.
As Shirley said, we have set some very stringent requirements through this procurement process, and we've really pushed suppliers. So rather than stating what we wanted, we went out to the market to test the best deal that we could possibly broker, and we've ended up with that, and that's why we've partnered with Octopus. Octopus are consistently scoring high, 4.8 on Trustpilot, only recommended which supplier. They have one simple, through London Power, we'll have one simple tariff, one simple switching tool where a prospective London customer will be able to give their details within as little as 2 minutes and start that switching process, which is very different to what happens in some energy companies. So this is about quick switching, it's about simple language, and it's about world-class customer service.
Just to be clear, that switching process then follows a process that the companies have to talk to each other.
But is this any different to what Octopus were offering beforehand?
What is different is the guarantee that this tariff will always be within the 10% of the cheapest, and the rollover to the cheapest comparable tariff.
So Octopus wasn't offering those two things beforehand?
This is part of the USP of this energy company, yes. In addition to reinvestment into London's communities through any profits, and also what we've touched on, because we've talked briefly on fuel poverty, it's about having a sympathetic approach to fuel poverty as well, which is building on all the good work Octopus is doing. This is about being proactive in monitoring people's accounts. It's about stopping them falling into debt. It's about stopping or mitigating against self-disconnection because people are on prepayment meters. So this is about us pushing out smart prepay and helping people
I'm just
manage
trying to
and use
get
their
at
energy
what Octopus offering these things beforehand. Does anybody offer these things, or is this very unique?
Not in this package, not the way that we've done it, and not with that 10%. The guarantee of always being within 10% of the cheapest.
They'll offer elements of this. What we've done, as Shirley said, is we've packaged this together. We've run focus groups this year to understand what Londoners ultimately want, what speaks to them, how do they want to be served. And as a result, we've listened. We've built a package that I think is competitive. It's about fairness. It's about giving back, and it's also hassle-free. So that is the package that you get.
I just asked these questions again. Your answer's fine. I just asked this question because this company is still not what we were promised by the mayor in his manifesto, and I'm just trying to understand if we're not going to have that, and clearly we're not because this exists. Is this significantly different? Is it delivering more or less than what we were promised?
So we've been through this. I think we looked at we did our review on the mayor saying he wanted to set up a supply company for London, and we looked at the benefits, and this was the less risky to Londoners, and offered an opportunity to do something quicker and to make it this sort of holistic package. One of the things we were talking about is how do you make that gateway to some of the programmes that we're talking about of fuel poverty. So what we've got, we believe, is absolutely the best deal for Londoners.
Okay, just a quick, completely different tack here, completely different thing. We talked about seeking funding from the government for energy efficiency in London, and you've constantly, you consistently, let me use that word, it's a familiar word, you've consistently asked for extra funding for different bits of the environmental package. How much in total do you think you're asking for?
Well, the climate plan talked about in terms of retrofitting, something I think was
not just retrofitting, all of your asks to government. I mean, if you don't have
the cost of
everything that you've asked
right,
for.
Just
Can we not stick to environment issues, please?
Well, I am saying within the environmental package, that's what I'm asking for. It's internal.
You didn't say environmental package.
Well,
You said
exactly
all
what
of
I
your
meant.
asks.
Why don't you
The
submit
government.
this as a written question?
Yeah.
Because it's obviously
It's very detailed.
It's very, very detailed. So
I'll get to that. Shirley, of course, if I get there's a few things you might need to add together before you give me an answer.
Yes.
I quite happily receive that in writing. That'd be great.
Committee.
To the committee, excuse me, through the chair. Excuse me, chair. One last thing, small question, and I suspect the answer is yes. Will the new energy company be giving advice to people about how to use their energy more efficiently? You know, not just turn the heater on, leave the window open. Is that part of the package, this idea of helping people change their behaviour by encouraging and educating them, and if so, how?
Coupled with our other programmes, yes. So for example, we have our Warmer Homes Advice Service, which gives advice to people on, how they might improve their homes through energy efficiency, which will also look at, are you paying more than you need to? You should think about switching. So that's one way. But then, we've got a number of other programs and advice about how you might retrofit your home, how might you think about, installing heat pumps, solar retrofits, all of those sorts of things. And that's partly why the company, where they don't do some of those, can link up to the advice and information that we have through the programs we have, so that they act as a gateway to signpost. But also they've got Octopus have got some very, very innovative tariffs that they've been working on for example electric vehicles, and in the future, or now actually, on smart meters, and sort of balancing how you use how you might balance the energy system and so on, storage, and so those are all things that we want to look at over time. First thing is to get this underway with this tariff for December, but that's the beauty of partnering with a company like Octopus, because of that innovation. They're a challenger to the market. They want to make sure that we look at the system as a whole. They're not just selling energy, they're looking to how do we help both on fuel poverty, but helping on reducing emissions to help London, the UK, become a zero carbon.
I just say because it's a teachable moment in it. If you're prepared to switch, you're probably prepared to hear other things around what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So they've got lots of advice, packs and stuff that we've been sending out.
This is another unique element of London Power, which Octopus or any other energy company can't offer, which is a gateway, as Shirley said, to the mayoral programmes. And we've been quite clear in our requirements of the energy company that we've partnered with, that we need to be able to signpost customers upon sign up to other schemes to give them greater assistance if they're eligible. So things like Warmer Homes, but also other schemes that are run in boroughs and other local authorities within London. So this gateway, I think, will open up over time, but we're engaging with boroughs already on that. We're also going to be able to get data as well, consumption data, to be able to understand how customers use their energy, and to be able to, in the future, hopefully start to tailor and refine our offers, like Warmer Homes, to people that have particular needs and have particular behaviours.
Thank you. David.
Thank you. Morning.
Morning.
So you mentioned the energy company is going to be supplying 100% renewable energy.
Mm-hmm.
Is gas and electricity both of those things?
It is.
Where are you?
But the
100%
renewable electricity. Yes.
Okay, electricity, but not the gas.
No,
I mean, that's my
You
question.
burn it once.
The gas is not going to be renewable. Is that correct?
There are a few energy companies on the market that are offering renewable gas. It's quite difficult to do. Octopus are obviously they're leading on so many fronts. I'm sure in the future they will be, but they are offering products like, and we may want to broaden our offer in the future. Gas, greener gas tariffs, like gas offset tariffs. But what we want to do with London Power is go out with a very simple offer first off. We have scope to be able to introduce other tariffs in the future, but this is a new and novel venture for the GLA, so we're about getting it right with a simple, clear, fair tariff first off, 100% renewable electricity, and we have scope to do more in the future.
Okay, so I just wanted to be clear on that. It's not 100% gas renewable, it's only the electricity, but the gas will be from non-renewable sources. Okay, thank you. That's that. I just wanted to clarify that. I assume you've made a business plan for the company, and you mentioned a profit, which is very good. But are you envisaging a profit in your first year, first 2 years, first 3 years, or
so
when?
Again, because this is commercial in confidence, we're not able to tell you. We'll be publishing the mayoral direction at some point over the next few days, I think.
I mean, we hope to break even and start to create profit within the first 4-year contract term. The contracts, as Shirley said, are extendable up to 8 years. So that's not bad. I mean, if you were to compare that against other models like a fully licensed supply company, if you look at Bristol, you look at Nottingham, they've taken years to break even. I think some haven't yet. This is one of the reasons why we went down this route. We're not going from a standing start. We're partnering with a very well-seasoned supplier. So hopefully, we'll be able to break even earlier than compared to some of those other
Well, that's good to hear that you possibly might break even and even make a profit by 2023, but maybe make a loss initially. I mean, that's as a startup, you probably would make a loss initially. Is that correct?
So this is a business, and so we are aiming to make a surplus so that we can help Londoners reinvesting the mayor's part of that surplus. Obviously, we need to make enough money to cover the costs of Octopus, and the contract has been signed. So I'm assuming, that we are both, we're both happy with that. So,
yeah. So I mean, it's going to be subsidised perhaps for the first 2 or 3 years. I mean, which part of the GLA group is going to be providing the subsidy if it's needed?
We set aside a budget of, I think it was £4 million. We don't expect to use all of that.
£4 million. Is that
set
for
up to start up the company,
right?
And we've committed 2.42 today.
Right. But imagine, you talked about 3.4 million homes in London. Now imagine that you have many more homes than you envisage signing up for this. Will that then need more subsidy?
No.
That would
so the point is that
faster.
Yeah,
if that happens,
you'll break even faster. So the more customers that you have, the more people will sign up.
Right.
Then the more profit you make, the more surplus you make, which will then can be reinvested.
So even though you're guaranteeing to be in the lowest 10% of tariffs, that won't need any subsidy. You'll still be making a profit for each household. In terms of the cost you pay and the cost. In the term of the first contract. So the cost that you're paying for the energy, the gas and electricity, that you're going to be charging the customers more than the cost you're paying. Is that right?
We're not paying anything. What we are receiving is a commission for every customer that joins London Power. Breaking even and profit making is a product of commission payments that we receive per customer, per fuel, and we have a payment that will come in when we get them for acquisition and the retention of that customer, and that will be minus operating costs. So the product of breaking even profit making is your commission minus your operating costs.
I see. So you're more like acting as an agent for Octopus Energy, something along those lines.
It's a white label, so we partner
model?
essentially. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's interesting to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tony, if you can be quite speedy, because we're...
This meeting actually has been hijacked because we've had this thing here, and despite what has been said, I think we're entitled to raise particular questions on this. In expanding what your answer was, truth of the matter is that the GLA is simply going to be a commission agent and an advertising agent for Octopus, isn't it?
Don't think so. I think we've been absolutely clear that the mayor is wanting to help people who are struggling to pay their bills. The energy market, and particularly the big six, weren't doing that. We've seen Ofgem introduce a price cap because the consistent way that the energy market was underserving customers. So going down this route, we have come together with a competitively priced tariff within, giving people the cheapest 10%.
You're not answering the question about you being an agent. Mr. Hardy has specifically said you're going to get a commission on this.
So there are a number of business models that operate.
Which means that you are an agent for this company. In addition to that, you have told us that you have already committed 2.4 million as a sort of contribution to getting this thing off the ground. I would suggest that the advertising that Octopus is going to get as a result of this meeting and as a result of this statement that you have produced saying how wonderful Octopus is going to generate far more overall commission than the 2.4 million, so they're kind of exploiting us.
We have contracted...
You have constantly said, as indeed has Mr Hardy, how wonderful Octopus is. Octopus is part of that sector of the industry which is providing challenger companies. You have hit upon Octopus. You've told us that Octopus is the best. You're not revealing the papers, so they may well be the best. We're not in a position to judge. But the return that Octopus is going to get, because the GLA has decided to take them on, is going to be the most tremendous advertising boost for them. Frankly, I take the view that the Mayor has totally gone back on his manifesto promise to say that he was going to produce a not-for-profit organisation. You have expressly said that you expect the company to make a profit, and you have merely said that they will plough back the profits into various works in London. That's not what a non-profit making organisation does. A non-profit making organisation, if it's making surplus income, reduces its charges to ensure that there shall not be a profit. And Madam Chairman, I think that you really must press the Deputy Mayor to give some kind of ballpark figure as to the numbers of people who they think are going to be signed up to this. There are 4 million homes in London. I think we are entitled to know what the target is for customers amongst those 4 million. The Deputy Mayor merely needs to say 10%, 20%, 5% or something, but simply to come to us and say, well, it's commercially confidential, and we've got no idea how many people we're going to sign up to pay a commission to Octopus for is not acceptable.
So, can I come back on some of those things?
Yes, please.
So, first of all, we are not advertising Octopus.
You have just been doing that.
I was asked who the company that we are partnering with. What we are going to be advertising is the name of the company, London Power. That's what will be out there. Obviously, because it's a white label, you have to say who you're partnering with, just as they have partnered with a number of organisations before. They are now partnering with, they partnered with a number of, organisations like M&S before, the Co-op and so on. We have entered into a commercial contract with them. We are the client. The Mayor is the client. So that brings an element of control which gives us the same benefits that we saw devising a fully licensed supply company would do in terms of control over the ethos, the tariff, the linkages up to some of the other programmes that we want to do on fuel poverty. What is absolutely clear is the Mayor has set those things, and the delivery partner, I hesitate to name them again, is asked to and will be required to meet a number of service level agreements to meet our objectives. They are a series of over 30 service level agreements, very detailed ones that require monitoring about service that they provide to customers, response times, the tariff, how lots and lots of things I can get into, and I can give you some information about the sort of broad service level agreement areas that we get into, but not the detail, because it's a commercial contract. So just to be absolutely clear, that's the approach that we're taking, and it's a London-wide programme for Londoners.
But Tony's question was, can you give a percentage of the number of households in London? So we know there's roughly 4 million homes. What sort of percentages would make this whole project?
We've looked at scenarios, but as I've said, this is all part of our the business case development and the conversations that we've had with the company, which is a commercial contract, so therefore in confidence, because what you can't do is you set those numbers up and you look at the offer and the amount of money we're giving, and then that you can work backwards to work out what the commission is.
So how do you propose that we check that you're getting a good deal?
Spot on.
how do you propose that we
Well,
check
I'm very happy to
on
come and tell you
progress?
how it's going within, you know, for example, are they meeting their service level agreements? We'll have some things around customer complaints, I think, as well. So I can write to you.
Customer complaints, and what was the other one?
What did I just say?
Well,
We can. I think what we can do is write to you afterwards with the areas that we feel, and as advised by our procurement and our lawyers, as to what we can give you as the metrics.
It's not measurable. The chairman is asking you, what is the measurable criteria?
And the Deputy Mayor has said that she will write to us, having checked with the lawyers what she is able to say, because this is a commercial agreement. But we would like to hear back from you very quickly on how we as a committee can measure the progress on this particular venture. Jeanette, you wanted to come in. Nikki. We are going, members, we are going to have to be very quick on the next items. Yep, no, I totally get it, and that's why I'm letting this run on. But we do need to be mindful of time.
Having been for years and years and years with a very eco-efficient company, you know, 100% renewable, etc., I've just switched to Octopus. So what would you advise me to do come December? Should I be switching now to London Power?
You can register now for interest, and they will send you details of the offer when it launches. And then I would advise anybody in your position to compare the offer. And that's the point, is we are an entrant into the market, we have a very good offer. You have to look at what your offer is, whether there are exit fees or not, and whether you feel our offer delivers what you need. So it's not just about the tariff, as I've said. There are lots of other things that this offer, the London Power offer, is delivering. And then if you judge it, and I think you will see that it's a great offer, and then you should be able to switch.
Thank you. And one other question on Renew, which was, you talked about a successor programme, and you talked about targeting. Are you going to, and you talked about going deeper, deeper green, deeper, you know, insulation and so on.
Yeah.
Are you going to target the able-to-pay sector, what we call the able-to-pay sector?
It's a separate programme, so that's our...
It's a separate programme?
Yes, so this Renew is about social housing and
right, so it's another
mixed
programme.
tenure housing, yeah.
Right, okay. And you have got information about that already? You've been doing that, have you?
Yes, we have been, through our Warmer Homes service, is the able to pay. Could you write and just say how the able to pay programme has done? Yeah, we'll write to you with that as well. Yeah.
Thank you, via the Chair. Thank you.
Jeanette.
Chair, I just want to ask a question for confirmation, and then I just want to say something else. I've just heard the Deputy say that you have received advice about the whole procurement process, and you've received legal advice. Okay, and if that advice exists, and thank you for answering that. So, Chair, if that advice exists, then I think we ought to seek to see that advice, both the procurement advice and the legal advice. And why I say this is because a previous mayor tried to be a customer when he wanted to set up his own schools or academies, and found himself up against a block because it was ruled that that wasn't appropriate, and then had to set up an arm length vehicle. And what I've heard really doesn't sit comfortably with me unless I can actually see some other comments. And I would ask you, Chair, for us outside this meeting to find out through our own ability to get legal advice, just to explore this whole thing. And if this committee can't do it, then it's irrespective of you. Somebody said the GLA's, did you say the mayor's not putting any money in it?
No, I've said that the mayor has committed already 2.42 million. 2.42. And just to be absolutely clear, that we've taken this through, you know, the legal processes. We've checked that we have the virus to do it. The procurement process, we were advised that we had to go down an OG process, which is why it's taken this long, rather than in some boroughs where they've not been able to do that. So we've had the legal checks. And that's in the mayoral decision. So when that's published, you'll be able to see that. And then if you have any further questions, very happy to respond.
And thank you for saying that. But I've sat here around tables, and I believe at one oversight committee I sat at, an organisation that has the mayor as chair said the very same thing about the Garden Bridge. And I've heard it on many occasions, these sort of explanation, which when we go further down the road, there's a big oopsie. And I'm just wanting to say that, and something like this where is so important, and if it's right, and it's been done right, then it's to be welcomed. But I just think so many questions of concerns have been raised across party groups about this, then this committee has to be clearer. And to find that clarity, I'm asking the chair away from this meeting, where all the papers are pulled together, that we actually seek further advice so that we are assured in our scrutiny. Scrutiny isn't about my view, your expertise. Scrutiny is about looking at the evidence that we have. And we have not got any evidence in front of us that can enable us to actually leave this room and say that we have carried out proper scrutiny on what we've heard.
So beyond asking the Deputy Mayor to write to us to say what she feels are the metrics that we should be measuring this against...
We'll hold all this together, gather everything, and then commission someone to look through this as thoroughly, clearly, as the executive has done when they were going through their deals. If it's clear that there are things that are commercially sensitive, that's fine, but we will have seen the evidence.
Thank you.
And I hope members will agree to that.
Do members...
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I had one tiny extra question, which was about Transport for London's just using 0.01% of renewable energy. And the Mayor has said that he will be looking at power purchase agreements to take that forward. And I just wondered if you had any update on that, on progress on that, which would enable the Mayor to be investing in renewable projects using the kind of scale of TfL's energy procurement power.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot to Transport for London about that. It's a really complicated process, the PPA. So they've been getting expert advice, financial and legal as well. So that process is ongoing. And what I've been doing is just chasing, basically, to make sure that
Do you have any
keep
sense
progress.
of next timescale on that? To what's the next milestone you could expect?
Not at the moment, but I can find out from Transport for London and write to you.
If you could write to us, that would be really helpful. Okay, so we are running a bit behind, but that was thank you, members. That was good questioning. We are now moving on to look at waste and incineration, and I am going to hand over to David.
I'll begin the first section of this. Again, so I just want to ask you about waste. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Having a change. No
Yes.
worries. I'll start again in a few seconds.
Dunwoody.
Great, yeah, thank you. Good morning. Yeah, so this section's on waste and incineration. So obviously we know the Mayor has a target of making London a zero waste city and wants to increase recycling rates, but they've actually been decreasing in London. And we hear the latest figures. London's recycling rate is 33% compared to the UK as a whole, which is 43%. So what are the Mayor's short-term priorities to jumpstart and increase recycling rates in London?
We've been doing a lot. So for example, the first thing was making sure that one of the sort of barriers to increasing recycling rates is the inconsistency of service that people get in London. So the Mayor, through his London Environment Strategy, has set a requirement for all boroughs to collect 6 dry recyclables. and to increase food waste collection. And the best way of doing that is to collect food waste separately. So again, that's a requirement in the strategy. And then extending that to not just curbside properties, but to flatted properties. And obviously, you know, in London we have a lot of those properties as well. So initially setting the policy, then working through the powers that we have, we've asked each borough to develop a reduction and recycling plan, which looks bottom up as to what they're able to do. So we know boroughs are different. You know, they have a different sort of makeup of buildings. They have different levels of gardens. So, you know, the contribution of garden waste will vary across London. So taking that as a baseline to work out what their baseline recycling target could be, so that we were told as part of the strategy that setting a sort of one target for all boroughs, you know, we listened to that feedback and said, okay, but what we want is each borough to set out for us and give us the evidence about what they are able to do, and then that process is going through the through that RRP process. And we're checking those at the moment, and we hope to, by the end of the year, start signing some of those off. So each borough will have a target that reflects what they're able to do, but also looking at independent evidence that RAP, the government agency that looks at recycling, has said if you did certain things, what might you be expected to achieve? And that gives the challenge that the team have been giving, and we're working with the London Waste and Recycling Board team, which is a partnership between the Mayor and the boroughs, so they're part of this process. So then we'll get some good recycling rates. So that's through our powers. And then through LWAR, we've been running pilot projects to give best practice. So, for example, we're working with their programme called Resource London on a flats recycling project, you know, to understand what are the things that will improve recycling by people who live in flats. Is it layout? Is it, you know, specific infrastructure? Is it communications? Is it having, you know, somebody who's monitoring the site, talking to people, you know, day to day? What are those sorts of things? And learning those lessons. So again, that best practice can be incorporated into the reduction and recycling plans, and that we can keep seeing what we might be able to do at the GLA, or what boroughs can do, or through the partnership at LWAR as well. And then finally, just a couple of other things. The Draft London Plan has set out very specific policies about new developments and making sure that there is space available for infrastructure, in particularly for flatted properties. And we've introduced, and this is very important, that you know, through the waste hierarchy, we need to reduce the amount of waste that we're producing in the first place. So through this circular economy approach, we're asking each new development to produce a circular economy statement to talk about how they might reduce the waste that they produce in building the development. And then separately from that, we're working with LWARP and through LWARP to talk about what are the circular economy approaches that boroughs might be able to adopt from a whole host of issues, from textiles, building materials, food, electronic equipment and so on. So they've developed a route map for each of those, and what we're working with LWARP now is how to translate that into something practical that boroughs can do. Often many of those things are dealt with by companies, you know, packaging and so on. So, you know, developers, which is why we put that requirement to the London Plan. But for local authorities, it's very difficult to reduce, you know, to take that circular economy approach. So what we're trying to do is identify what they might be able to do, whether it's advice or practical services as well. So I think those are the broad areas. And then finally, and we've referred to it, I think, before in my opening statement, was that the Mayor has checks to see contracts as they go out, whether they're in conformity with the environment strategy, which we've had a number of contracts as they come to an end and are being renewed. We looked to see that they're meeting the requirements of the environment strategy and going beyond. Unfortunately, once they're let, you know, once they go out to OJU, our powers cease. But that's why the recycling plans and the resource reduction recycling plans are very, very important, because it sets out the long-term ambition and the target for boroughs.
Is it? You mentioned, you know, obviously there are inconsistencies within between boroughs.
Yeah.
Are there any boroughs that you can highlight who have got a particularly good practice?
There are a number of boroughs, but I think maybe if you're thinking about where one that's been done recently that we're already seeing the advantages in terms of recycling rates going up is Ealing. They've reorganised their service and have seen quite a big uptick in the recycling rate, but. So that's one particularly, and I think they've got some. What do they say? Something like 45% increase to 50%, up from 45% in 2015-16, and they're looking to increase the tonnage of food waste recycle as well, and they've made some savings that they're able to reinvest into the scheme. So I think that the advantage of the reduction recycling plan is that the first time really the boroughs have been looking at their waste service as a whole and really thinking about it not just as a collect the waste and shove it off and get it recycled somewhere, or more often incinerated. It's about how do we take a new approach to waste, starting with the top of the waste hierarchy. How do you reduce the amount of waste in the first place being produced? How do we now deal with food waste? How do we deal with our commercial waste that's being produced, which is very similar to household waste? It could be dealt with in the same way. And at the same time, lobbying government for more resources and more powers. And actually, we're really pleased to see that the government's waste strategy reflected, the policies the Mayor has been talking about, finally, advocating consistency of service and that, this is the way forward.
But are there differences between the different types of waste in terms of how much is recycled? I mean, metal cans, for example, iron, aluminium, glass, and food and packaging.
I'm sure there are. I don't know if you know, Andrew, but if not, we can write to you.
Well, different materials are variable recyclable, and then you end up with various levels of contamination. So yes, different waste streams have different rates of recycling and recyclability as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, people may think, well, glass and metal cans is more important to recycle them than food and packaging. I mean, do you find that that's something that is bears out in practice in terms of rates that are recycled? I mean, do you find that there's more glass being recycled and less food as a percentage?
It's more about the availability of the service to recycle, which goes back to consistency. So if you know that your service collects, for example, plastic and foil and whatever, then the service is there and then it's made easy for you, and it becomes a habit, then that's fine. But if you don't have a service, so the first thing is making sure the service is available and it's consistent. And glass and paper have been going, the recycling of those has been a long time, so people sort of know that. It's things like plastics and foil that we need to get people thinking about more, and food waste. And actually, I think 2/3 of the boroughs collect food waste now, a third don't. But we know that people want to recycle their food waste. So it's again making sure they have the service there so that they're able to do that. And similarly for commercial companies as well, the sort of little shops and so on. Just generally that we need to be thinking that's a whole lot of waste that's just not being, the value of it's not being captured, and we should really be doing that.
So you're saying perhaps an increase in the availability of of people to recycle food, maybe having a specific sort of food bin, is something that maybe needs to be improved across London. Would you say is that kind of what you're saying, or would you say the same also for packaging waste as well? That there needs to be an improvement of the availability of.
So for food waste, as I said, about 2/3 of the boroughs already do that in some way, shape, or form. We just wanted the remaining boroughs to do that, and to collect it separately, because that's a better quality of waste. It reduces the contamination of the other recyclates, and then that increases the value as they're being recycled. On packaging waste, it's slightly different in that it comes back down to the companies and the manufacturers. So what we can do is push people to say we don't. We want less packaging, and you'll have seen lots of people have been doing that, which is why the government introduces consultation and its proposals to require manufacturers to use less packaging, use more recyclable packaging, and for us, having got the packaging, then there's less for us to deal with, and then or to recycle, and obviously it's recycling after reducing is the best thing.
Something that concerns me with packaging and paper, I think particularly, is where it gets recycled, and that if it's recycled properly, because we hear these stories of barges coming in with goods from China and so on. They deliver their goods to the UK and then they fill up with waste recycling and just take it back to Indonesia, and it gets dumped somewhere and not recycled properly. I mean, do you have any figures for what percentage of London's waste recycling, particularly packaging and paper, actually gets recycled here in the UK, and what percentage is taken off to, say, Indonesia, where it might not be recycled properly, because we really don't want that to happen?
I don't, but I think we can try and find out and write to you.
Yes, we would need to look into the exact figures in that. Obviously, there's the self-sufficiency target that we're working towards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So one of the areas that you've just been touching on is about the level of boroughs collecting food waste and saying that it's 2/3. Obviously, the Mayor does have the powers of direction. If any of the 1/3 of those boroughs, the residual boroughs, as one might term them, fail to commit to segregating food waste as part of their reduction and recycling plans, is the Mayor likely to use his powers of direction?
The Mayor has always said that he wants to work with boroughs to improve their services, and the focus and the energy has to be on that. And I think, through this reduction and recycling plan process, we've had very, very good engagement. And I think, the feedback we're getting is officers and members are very happy that there is an increased limelight focus on this service, which is really important to residents and to commercial companies as well. But the Mayor, as ever, reserves the right to use his powers in the cases that
he's reserving those rights. Because I've raised this in my patch with Wandsworth, for example, and they seem to be rather resistant to the idea of producing a proper reduction and recycling plan. And I wondered if engagement with the Wandsworth officers is now improved and we're going to see something much better coming out.
We have had a series of engagements with Wandsworth officers, and they are expecting to deliver their recycling plan to our target, revised target, because they missed the deadline. But the target is for the end of the year. So that's what they've said to us, and that's what we're expecting.
The end of 2019. Okay, so it's now back in the works again. And obviously we've had quite a lot of discussion at Mayor's Questions and in this meeting and elsewhere on the issue of Barnet, who had temporarily suspended, allegedly, their food waste collections, and were doing some sort of modelling exercise. Although you just said that Ealing had improved and also saved money, Barnet were claiming that their collections were very expensive. Is there any news on whether or not they've gone back into food waste collections?
So the process, having written to them and said that we wanted them to go down, which they've now agreed to do, to prepare their RRP, their reduction and recycling plan. That is going ahead well. So they've produced data, and the officers are now analysing that to go back to them to make sure.
And is that data private between you and Barnet, or can it be shared?
It's Barnet's data, so
right.
it would be for them to release.
Okay, so that might be something for the Assembly member for Barnet and Campden to investigate if he wants to. Now, obviously, we asked the government for £100 million to help with improving infrastructure to help us improve recycling across the whole of London. And I think if you divide 100 million by 32 boroughs in the city, that's actually not a lot per borough. I wondered if that was something that you were discussing again with the government. And whether there was any likelihood, is there any progress to accessing that money at all?
No, well, again, the rough costings were between 100 and 300 million, depending on the sort of level of recycling services and infrastructure and the target that you could achieve with that money. We've asked for that funding to come out of the Clean Growth Strategy funding, or as a share of the landfill tax that we don't get access to. So unfortunately, no, we've not had any progress. We've raised it as part of our comprehensive spending review ask, and I know the London Waste and Recycling Board have made similar representations to DEFRA. Obviously, the strategy is out, and they have said that they want to deliver 6 dry recyclables, separate food waste collection, and they know that that requires changes to infrastructure for local authorities. What we've also made the point to them is that the boroughs who have been early movers on this agenda and have been progressive and really understood the agenda shouldn't be penalised for having paid for this, and the laggards who we all are unhappy about don't get the benefit of funding, and people who have done the right thing aren't given some credit for that.
The government has obviously come out with some of their own proposals relating to standardised household recycling. Do you think those proposals are going to meet London's needs, particularly obviously as we have large areas with flatted blocks, which we were talking about before?
It's a good start, but I think we've made a number of recommendations to them about better infrastructure. Their own agency, RAP, have sort of set out some good advice. I think what would help is the representations the Mayor has made about, and we set out in the environment strategy about the sorts of initiatives that need to be happening. So, for example, the 6 dry recyclables, if we can get that collected through commercial companies and so commercial premises and local authorities are able to do with that would really see a big boost in recycling rates that would help meet our London rate as well and reduce the amount going to incineration or landfill.
Yes, which brings me on to my next point. Obviously, that would reduce that. In my own area, we've got the new South London Waste Partnership with the 4 boroughs entered into that, and Sutton was, home to that in the first place. Are there any figures which you could share with us perhaps afterwards to show the impact and whether now the other 3 boroughs are moving up towards the 60% recycling that Sutton had previously achieved? I think it would be really good to hear that.
Okay.
And generally, what progress is being made in relation to the targets for reducing waste that's going to incineration and eliminating sending recyclable and biodegradable waste to landfill. Where are we on that?
So London, the rest of the country have seen a drop in recycling rates. London has sort of just about maintained, I'd say stagnated or plateaued, depending on whether you're being positive or negative about it. But we have actually seen a slight increase. So against the general UK drop, London has seen a slight increase. Obviously, it takes time to bring in the service changes that will then get these recycling rates up. Because they're dependent on contract changes. So we know that local authorities are locked into very long contracts. So trying to find the right time to break those contracts or at renewal will then see these sort of spikes. But part of the RRP process is showing that when you have all that information together and you really look at the system, the waste system as a whole, and really think about it in a circular economy approach, you will see, as Ealing have done, and as the South London Waste Partnership have done in looking at this afresh, that there are savings to be had through reorganising what you do in a different way that customers, the residents want, but that will also help generate the environment, and that money that is then available to plough back into that service or to be used for other services.
And obviously, separating out the food waste then addresses the points that Assembly Member Curtin was making earlier on in relation to being able to access green gas, because the more you take out the food waste and anaerobically digest it, the more likely it is that Londoners are going to be able to access green gas and perhaps through London Power. I was going to ask you for an update on where we are with Corrie and the DCO, but I think you covered that off in your initial remarks. I just wondered, do we actually have any figures for, because I know that a lot of people are very concerned about changes at the incinerator in Edmonton, the bringing online of the incinerator in Beddington, concern about the growth potentially, possibly, of the incinerator in Belvedere, which is the Corrie plant I just referred to. Do we actually have figures for the impact on our air quality from the energy from waste stroke incinerators that we have in London? Is that something that you could perhaps provide to us afterwards?
Yeah, I think
as a sort of percentage, do we know what that might be overall?
I'm not sure we've got a percentage, but we're certainly making sure that it's well regulated through the Environment Agency. And
yes, I know it's something the EA regulates quite closely.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there is some data in the London Atmospheric Emissions Inventory, so I can write to you afterwards.
That would be really helpful, if you wouldn't mind. That would be really good. And we've also had Greenpeace and the Telegraph. We're looking into some of the working practices at Corey. Do we think that the Mayor might strengthen what he's doing around the interface with the people who are providing these incinerators, energy from waste plants in London? Because obviously that was quite a concerning piece in the Telegraph.
So one of the things that we've been doing through the contract and the contract process is making sure that through that process that we talk to the waste officers in boroughs to look at not just the waste service but the wider operation of that service. So, for example, could they and should they not think about increasing or requiring the London living wage, for example? And what are they doing about making sure that the vehicles that they use for the service are at least Euro 6 and therefore LES and ULEZ compliant? And also thinking about moving and going beyond so that they start to think about electrification as well. So we don't restrict ourselves just to, are you meeting the LES objectives of 6 dry recycle and, what are you doing around the circular economy? It's about this is a service to Londoners and to the community, and how can you as a service contribute to the quality of life and well-being of Londoners.
That's good to hear, and I think that's something I'd like to see the waste officers across the boroughs doing. The thorny question, though, we're talking about, moving ahead. We're saying London's stagnating, we're saying everywhere else has been going backwards. What is London going to do with its residual waste if the reduction and the recycling plan targets and those targets in the strategy are not met? What are we going to do with our waste?
We are absolutely focused on getting those targets met, which is why we are looking at both through the RRPs, both at domestic, household waste as well as commercial waste. Doing that will enable us to meet those targets. The London Plan has set out the capacity that we need, and we have sufficient capacity without the new Corrie incinerator that they're proposing to build out in Bexley. So we have sufficient, I think. And then obviously the big push is to drive down the waste that's being produced in the first place. So as we drive down packaging, the use of packaging through by manufacturers, and we're doing more on reusing water bottles and coffee cups and so on, then we will see less of that waste needing to go to incineration. So we don't.
I think it's one of the areas this committee is going to continue to come back to, not just in terms of the potential for things being sent abroad on boats and then ending up potentially either going into energy from waste plants in Denmark or ending up in rivers in Indonesia, but also I don't think we'd want to see waste being trucked out of London and then thrown into holes in the ground in Yorkshire, which I did see a report on as well. So obviously really important is the reduction angle before we move on to the recycling. What are you going to be doing to get all of the London boroughs to move to the circular economy approach? You referred to LWAB, which obviously they're represented on. Do you feel that the circular economy approach has now been adopted by all of the London boroughs?
Not yet, because it's a new. It's not a new concept. It's pretty straightforward, really, about making the best use of the resources that you have. So it is essentially the waste hierarchy. But I think there is much greater emphasis. People realise that to transition to a zero carbon economy, you also have to take a circular economy approach, and not that sort of linear sort of take, make, and then dispose. I think what boroughs are, and it's not just London boroughs, and it's not just London. This is something that internationally people are struggling with. Is what is how do you actually translate the circular economy approach into something practical that we can all understand and incorporate into our daily lives, and whether that's services or just our general behaviour. And so that's what we're working with the London Waste and Recycling Board, is to how to do that practically. What does that mean in terms of services you offer? So some of the
being
things...
very, very polite, and although you shook your head when I said are all boroughs embracing the circular economy approach, you haven't told me that which ones may not be. Let's ask the question the other way round, maybe. Do we have particularly good best practice examples of boroughs who've got really good reduction plans, really good recycling plans, who really embrace the circular economy approach, and how could that be modelled out to some of the other boroughs who are perhaps not quite as much on this page?
Okay, so I mentioned Ealing before. I think it's just, as the most recent example, but there are others, and we can certainly give you some more details after the meeting. I think taking that whole approach is what we're looking at through the recycling plans, and they're not yet ready. I don't feel comfortable sort of picking out names of boroughs just yet, because we still have to sign those off yet. But I don't know if there's any sort of on circular economy particularly.
Yeah, well, some boroughs are taking a particular lead, if I'm suitable to say then. Sutton, for instance, they've taken a real step forward. They've engaged consultants and generated their own circular economy strategy. One of the other initiatives that is ongoing is LWARP are supporting circular economy champions within boroughs, and so boroughs are nominating individuals who are suitably qualified but enthusiastic to try and explore what circular economy can mean for their own boroughs.
Would you be able to send us a list of the boroughs that have got the circular economy champions?
Yes.
That would be great.
I think it's they sign up 3 per year, and it's a year-long process where LWARP support those individuals both in their thinking and in their practices. So they explore what circular economy might mean for their own particular circumstances, and then what they can actually affect in practice. And that leads to a wide range of types of things, from responsible procurement to communications to things around resource efficiency and cost savings and things like that. So yes, there's lots going on there.
I mean, the benefits seem very clear to me, because I know, the amount that you pay to have your tonnage of waste collected in your gate fees is much higher than if you're sending food waste to have it anaerobically digested, or if you're taking it out of the waste stream altogether, and recycling is cheaper to collect. But we still seem to be moving quite slowly on this. Can I just quickly ask about food waste from businesses as well? Obviously, the headline figure nationally is that 40% of food is wasted, and we're trying to bear down on the household level of waste. But actually, quite a lot of the food waste is somewhere in the logistical supply chain to shops, but then also from businesses where presumably we've got, people who are running restaurants and takeaways and all the rest of it. Now, you've been tackling this through the trifocal programme. I wondered if you could tell us how successful that has been and how we're really going to start bearing down on food waste.
So they're doing very well. Trifocal evolved from the GLA's Food Safe programme, which was, we worked again jointly with RAP and the London Waste and Recycling Board. And they've got a number of deliverables around providing training, for example, to environmental health practitioners, working with community groups about doing waste audits, food waste audits, and talking to hospitality businesses about how to reduce their food waste. So again, we can, unless Andrew knows off the top of his head, we can send you the details of where they are on the targets. And then we'll be evaluating that, and we're expecting to see the results of that later this year, later in the autumn, as Trifocal heads to its closure. And then we're going to be producing a sort of a resource bank of information and best practice that people can use. But at the same time, we've just been announced as a flagship city, as one of 3 cities alongside New York and Sao Paulo, through the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Food Initiative. So again, through LWAR, we're working with the foundation to look at food waste and pioneering new initiatives with restaurants, supermarkets, working with local authorities, food industry leaders, to look at how we might transition to a food system, and looking at how you might look at food waste systems as well, to really try and cut back on that food waste. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Ellen MacArthur herself is an absolute leader, thought leader, as well as a delivery leader on circular economy. So we're really pleased to have had that sort of flagship city sort of nomination award, but obviously there's a lot to be done, engaging Londoners on what it is that they need. We know that, as I've said before, if you provide the services, then people will take part, but how do you actually get, the maximum participation as possible?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Jeanette, did you
Yes,
indicate earlier?
Yes, I did. It was
Super
just
speedy, because we are running out of time.
I'll be as quick as I can.
Thank you.
To the Deputy, as ever, we spend appropriate focus on the things we've just talked about, But I'm just mindful this is Fashion Week, and fashion has got this outrageous profile, and has been asked for donkey's years to look at itself, and it barely does that because that's not what it does. I'm just mindful that I was talking to somebody this week, and a pair of jeans takes around 10,000 litres of water to produce. That isn't really out there in your mind. I mean, have I just shared you new news, Assembly Member Bailey?
It seems like an awful lot of water for one pair of jeans.
It's verified. It's verified, and that's just to produce one pair. And you know, we have an industry here that is now got a section which is growing, the fast fashion. Yet we have a lot of campaigners talking about quality, whereas my constituents go for just buying to get clean clothing because of their circumstances and these throwaway items. I don't hear much about the work you're doing with the fashion industry, and I really don't want the answer to say that it's being done by culture, because I would have thought, because culture doesn't do waste, you do waste, and there's an industry here who is absolutely now, you know, at the crosshairs. Everybody's looking at it. How are you working with organisation? Not suggesting you go into partnership with Extinction Rebellion, as Stella McCartney has done, but they do have a lot of good points that they're making.
So I am going to say the culture team have been great in this, you know, and just to say, you know, the environment team work really closely with a number of teams across the GLA, because we don't want this just to be the environment team's work. We need to embed tackling environmental resource efficiency, climate change, water usage, all of those, you know, becomes the bread and butter work of all of the teams. So, you know, to give credit to Justine, Deputy Mayor for Culture, and her team, they recognise this on a number of fronts. So, you know, from working with the industry on how they might switch to renewable energy.
I think I know, because I've had a conversation with them, and what they're doing is just not enough for me, but I think it's within what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Waste is yours, and you are leading on waste.
Indeed.
I want to know what you're doing about it.
And we've been talking to the culture team and to, for example, the British Fashion Council about what they might be able to do more in this area. Again, through the London Waste Action Recycling Board, which is sort of, you know, an extension of the GLA. They've been working with a number of fashion partners to start looking at their sustainability in terms of the circular economy and what they might do to reduce waste and help people recycle clothing that they don't need to use anymore. And I think at the last time at the last committee I talked about Love Not Landfill, for example, some of the fashion recycling bags that they've been doing. But we've also seen, for example, the Environmental Audit Committee report about fast fashion and about the impacts on that, which I'm afraid disappointed to see the government didn't really take forward their recommendations. So, as I've said, we are talking to the culture team and to the industry about what more we might be able to do.
You're talking with?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking with is hardly going to bring about a change of behaviour, is it?
Just to point out, this is a global industry and it needs a global response. And what we're trying to do in London is what we can do in London with the players that we are able to access, which is largely some of the players that the companies that work here. And as I've said, through the London Waste and Recycling Board, we have been doing that. We've been working with local authorities to do what we can do in helping people think about recycling and reusing fashion items, and that's what we've been doing. We've got policies in our strategy that are talking about reuse and recycling. So I think we're doing what we can do with the powers that we have, and we, as ever, always try to do a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I would just suggest to you that you're engaged in European partnership work on other areas. This is something that you could take into those forums. it seems to me that you could bring a wonderful synergy together if you just brought the top 5 fashion cities together, London, Milan, Rome, what have you. And then people then could sit up and see you taking a role in that scale. And we all know and agree, it's when cities are bold and step up that they challenge these big industries. So, appreciate what you're doing, but I just think we are now in our 20th year as a GLA, and I just would like a little bit more oomph from the environmental people about this major industry.
We'll look for some oomph. Nikki, can you...
I'm just thinking that the culture team does have an international work stream, so they could make that work through that, I think.
I think they have been doing, so
yeah,
I know
sure
that they've been talking to international cities like New York about what more we can do about waste. We've had conversations about projects on that.
I just
Perhaps I could just write
Jeanette's
to
last
you.
point
Yeah.
could be, I just want to ask a question, I'll be as quick as possible, about going back to reducing residual waste. Residual waste going to mainly incineration. It grieves me terribly that when I put all my clean recycling materials together and then see them pushed together with, and crushed with glass and crushed, and aluminium cans slopping stuff over them, this nice clean paper and so on. So I know that what comes out of what's sent to recycling or what's sent to be recycled, actually, by the time it's gone through the MRF or the treatment process, is that so much is contaminated, it just adds to the residual. And I just wonder, what are we going to do about, we've got this example of the South London Partnership and source-separated waste, which is where many boroughs were at one stage. But now we're all doing this, mix it all up, mash it all up, and we just get just don't get value out of the materials in the way we could. And I'm just wondering, what are we going to do about this? And it would be lovely to have a list of when those contracts come up for review or changing.
So on the latter point, we published a contracts register, so this is something that the GLA has done.
Good.
So that's online now, so you're able to see whose contracts are coming up and when, and how big they are. On the source separation versus mixed, I mean that's been a long discussion about trying to, is it better to make it easier for people to recycle by putting it together and cheaper, or through the source separated approach? And the source separated approach requires a lot of space where there isn't very much space. So I think that's part of the problem about the way that London is made up, and not just us, but some of the other, big cities, about what's the right approach. And obviously, it's not something that the mayor has control over in terms of how waste is collected. That's a local authority responsibility and decision. All we're able to do is point them to the best practice, which RAP produces, and some of the work that LWAB and Resource London have been doing as well. We have been talking with LWAB about what more advice we can give about how to reduce contamination of waste, because we realise that is such a big issue, and we've set some targets, I think, in terms of some of our contracts on what the contractor must do in terms of reducing contamination, so we have much better material, extracting the value from that, the financial value, but also making less residual waste than produced that then goes to incineration or landfill.
I can make a comment, because I think it's not at the point, people are quite capable, I think, most of the time, of putting clean recyclables together. They wash their bottles out and so on. But it's then when it goes into a lorry, and it's all smashed up. And those who haven't washed out, then it goes over everything. And in fact, if it didn't go into a lorry which smashes everything up together, it would be a different story.
So those are the issues that local authorities are looking at through their recycling plans, because there are costs. What they come out with will be a determinant of what's in their borough, what the financial cost is of moving to a source separated, segregated collection scheme. So again, those are things that the borough has to look at about what the financial system, what the change of vehicles would require, when they're able to break their contracts or change their contracts, and looking at that cost to the local authority, which, we can give advice and recommend as to whether that's a good approach or not, ask them to look at best practice, but it's ultimately a borough decision because, the mayor's powers are confined to are they in general conformity, but with the restriction of not incurring excessive additional costs to the local authority or breaking contracts. Essentially.
Local authorities will have to get the value, of course, from these clean materials. That's another point.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to be moving us on to the air pollution section. I'm actually just going to bang the gavel briefly for a comfort break. And we'll say thank you to Andrew, and we'll be welcoming Oliver.
That's one way to welcome Oliver. Throw a charity.
GLA, Committee Room 5, Sound. 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 GLA, Committee Room 5.
Thank you and welcome back to the London Assembly Environment Committee, and we now welcome Oliver Lord, who is Deputy Air Quality Manager, alongside Shirley Rodrigues, who is the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy. And we're moving on to a section of questions on air pollution, and we're going to start with Tony Arbour with some questions.
Yes. Well, we have been charged to ask you if any of your findings are surprising in relation to how does the GLA use the Breathe London network data? Is any other monitoring being conducted outside of this? What are some of the most surprising findings from these data? And how are you responding to it throughout the policy cycle?
Tony, I think that was the question. That was the section that Jeanette was doing. I
Oh,
think
really?
you were doing section A.
Oh, she could, all right. I could still be surprised by asking a question about something which has surprised me, which relates to the first set of questions on relation to ULEZ.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether or not you have seen this report on the effects of displaced traffic from the closure of Hammersmith Bridge.
I haven't, no.
If I were to tell you that there are 8,000 additional traffic movements at Chalkers Corner in Mortlake, displaced traffic from Hammersmith Bridge, would it surprise you to know that it has had absolutely no effect on the level of pollution?
Until I see the report and read the detail, I don't think I could comment really. So.
You must know whether or not you'd find that surprising when you consider, Deputy Mayor, that in the statistics which you have just published, which the Mayor has just published, about the number of vehicles which have been displaced because of the ULEZ charges, a figure I think relating to fewer than 8,000 vehicles a day, and you are boasting by how much you have reduced pollution inside the ULEZ, and if I then tell you that a similar number of vehicles are now extra vehicles are passing through Chalkers Corner daily and is not having any effect whatever on pollution, are you surprised by that?
As I said, I need to see the data because what I'm not sure. I don't know what you're comparing. Are you talking about, polluting vehicles, non-polluting vehicles? I'm not sure whether we're comparing apples and oranges here. So I think I'd need to see what you're comparing.
No, I'm sorry. I do want to pursue this. I was truly astonished that I simply had the figures given to me, as in this report, which says that 8,000 additional vehicles per day are passing through Chalkers Corner in Mortlake. An extra 6,000 vehicles are crossing Chiswick Bridge a day because of the closure of Hammersmith Bridge, and it has had no effect whatever on the levels of pollution.
So
are you surprised to hear that?
I will take that away and look at the report, and I can write back to you to let you know whether I'm surprised or not.
Well, that's ridiculous, Deputy Mayor. You are either surprised or you're not.
Tony, I think, is this a Conservative group report that you're
No, it isn't. This is TfL.
No, TfL.
Oh, right.
We don't have the resources to make up figures.
Really?
Indeed.
It takes a functional bodies resource.
Let me go through.
It's never held Boris Johnson back.
He has the functional bodies done.
Oh, does he have a functional body?
When he was here.
Do you know, this is, take it from me, this is TfL stuff, and I queried it the instant that I saw it. I mean, it's unbelievable that you don't think it's surprising, just as a human reaction, rather than as Deputy Mayor for Environment.
I'm here as Deputy Mayor for Environment.
And it's having no effect whatever, according to this. Anyway, can you...
He's surprised that the Deputy Mayor isn't surprised. That's what we've got.
Yeah. Can you tell me, please, about the scrappage scheme? How extensively has it been used?
Okay, I'll just turn to the page so I can give you the right figures. So, the Mayor has 2 scrappage schemes. He's made available without government support 48 million pounds worth of scrappage support to help those who might find it more difficult to upgrade to greener options. 23 million pounds for the business scrappage scheme and a 25 million pound one for the low income scheme. On the 23 million pound business scrappage scheme, as of this week, we are dealing with 1,500 applications of totaling 4 million pounds in value, and we have supported 280 micro businesses who have helped scrap 337 vehicles at a cost of 1.2 million.
In relation to the scrappage scheme, which is to help people with low income,
yeah.
Did you say was the total figure?
That's a 25 million pound.
No. I thought you'd said how much has been claimed for this. Did you?
Not for the low income. The low income one hasn't launched yet. So this is for the business scrappage scheme.
My understanding is that the low income figure was a low income policy was announced in February. It's now the end of September. So when are you going to?
Later this year.
We're now in September.
It's the first scheme of its kind. It's really complicated because we're dealing with people who may be claiming who are on benefits, and as you know, the benefit regime is very complicated. It doesn't take much to tip you out of receiving benefits, and we want to make sure that is really understood in terms of the rules and eligibility and the processes. So I think we're taking the right amount of time to get this right, but as I've said, we'll be launching it later this year.
Didn't you know all that in February?
Sorry?
Didn't you? You must have known all of that in February. To announce something in February, which you're now telling us is going to be launched before the end of the year. You have 2 months left, 3 months generously, because I know you work over Christmas, because everybody works very hard here. So we will know before December the 31st, will we? We will. And just to remind you that this is set up as a scheme for the ULEZ expansion, which isn't implemented into force until October 21. So by launching it this year, we'll have a long period of time for people to get ready and to avail themselves of the scrappage scheme before the ultra-low emission zone is expanded. Will I take that? It's a very small take-up of the small business scheme, isn't it?
No, I think we're on track. I think.
You think that's okay?
I think it is. We this has been going a few months now. It's against a time when of huge economic uncertainty. The ultra-low emission zone was implemented in April, so a lot of people will wait to see how their behaviour changes in practice because of the charge. And so I think we're in a good place. We're dealing, as I've said, with 1,500 applications. The processing of that, it goes through a process where the applications come in, they have to be evaluated, people have to give evidence, they have to find the money doesn't get released until they scrap the vehicle. So this is why the numbers may look low, but I think they're very good for where we are. And again, we're helping people move and get ready for the ultra-low emission zone expansion in 2021. So quite a lot of time left.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lena, you wanted to briefly come in on scrappage.
Probably the other Assembly members have received this as well, but I was contacted by the London Chamber of Commerce, and I've had quite a lot of contact locally with my chambers, and they were suggesting that the launch of the ULEZ has impacted on their members and that there was a lack of awareness amongst their member group, companies. Have you been working with the Chamber of Commerce and other similar sort of Federation of Small Business, that kind of body that represents lots of the micro businesses, to ensure that they definitely know that the diesel scrappage scheme is available to small and medium enterprises? And if you haven't been up until now, is that something that you could develop to ensure that those who really do need the business scrappage are able to apply for it?
Yeah, so the design of the scheme was done, in consultation with the Federation of Small Businesses. We've done our own polling, which shows that 80% of all drivers say they know something about the ultra-low emission zone. In terms of anyone who, the support that's available to them, as I've said, we talked about the scrappage scheme that the Mayor has brought in, despite, we continue to lobby government, along with a number of other metro mayors and other cities who are bringing in clean air zones, to lobby government for access, but for a sort of a scrappage scheme, a national one, but also importantly to make sure London is able to access it. We have clean air funding that the Mayor is not able to access for Londoners, despite the fact that they are paying vehicle excise duty, fuel tax, and all of those sorts of things. And London is the biggest area of sort of air pollution that is likely to make sure to make the country not meet its legal limit. So it really is incumbent on government to support Londoners to do the right thing.
But you would be happy if the Chambers of Commerce were able to assist in getting messaging out about access to the Mayor has brought in his own scrappage scheme because government has not allowed that access to the 200 million clean air fund, which actually it's arguable whether that's a sufficient amount in any case, but this is available for London businesses, and I think getting the message out through whatever means necessary to make sure they all know about it. You don't have any objections to continuing to push the messages out with others? No,
absolutely not. And in fact, we have been. We talked to FSB about making sure that it was in their newsletters. We've done our own contact. So I think Transport for London, before the ULEZ was brought in, and carry on talking to the businesses that they're in contact with. Over 6,000, I think, were contacted, and then alongside the work that we did through the DVLA to make sure that letters were going to vehicle registered owners. We've done advertising campaigns. There's another one. We'll be doing some more in the run up to the ultra-low emission zone expansion, and we continue to talk about it. There's sort of adverts on the radio all the time about ultra-low emission zone. Check your vehicle, and there is support available. It's all on the website. We talk to boroughs who then roll it out.
And on the scrappage scheme, we've also done like leaflet drops at markets, for example. So it's quite hard to reach, a community, and so we welcome any support from.
I'll pass on the contact details of the person who contacted me, and I'm sure other Assembly members from the Chambers of Commerce, because working with the FSB, working with the Chambers, seems like a good routine. They've got lots of members, and it's a shame that the government hasn't joined the Mayor in with a scrappage scheme that covers the whole of the country.
Okay, thank you. Can I move us on to Jeanette?
Yes, Chair. Before I ask my question, can I add to what colleague has just said, and can I ask that wonderful organisation that the FSB is, I'm not sure that it's penetrated into black and minority owned and led businesses. Certainly wasn't 18 months ago when I went to one of their all-white members' meetings. Can I seek assurance from Oliver yourself that you will be going to the identified community papers that exist that disseminate, I'm thinking, in North London, you can reach up to 10,000 Turkish Kurdish readers, households who run businesses. We've got the Vietnamese community, and we've got the Pakistani community. We now know where they are. So are you going directly into their press, into their news systems, and using that as a means of getting this information out to those business owners?
So there's been quite an extensive stakeholder engagement plan around the scheme. I think there's always more we can add to it. So there's certainly been advertising in trade press, for example. But if there are specific community newsletters, you don't know if that's been done. I can find out for you and let you know.
I'd like to know if it has been done, and if not, then do you plan to do it?
If you have any specific groups, please let me know as well.
Thank you. My question now is about cleaning up London's air. And can I just start by congratulating you, Deputy, on getting 27 boroughs to participate in this Sunday's car-free day.
It's not down to me. I should give Will Norman the credit for the work, and Heidi Alexander as well.
Well, you are just too humble sometimes. I only direct it to you because you are the
Here.
Deputy for Environment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you can pass on my congratulations
I will
to
do.
whichever deputy you want to.
Mm-hmm.
How successful do you expect it to be in terms of showing Londoners the possibility for cleaner air?
Very successful because it's we've had a number of car-free days that are borough-led that are always useful at local level. I think to show what a car-free environment might look like, what the possibilities are. We've run a number of events, like Ride London and others, again that give people a flavour of what not having cars around might mean for your enjoyment of London and the space, but actually having something dedicated to both reimagining your city, understanding that the impact it has on air quality and on noise, that it will have impacts on climate, but just your enjoyment of the city, but in central London and in such a large space, I think the largest space we've had, accompanied by, as you said, activities at borough level, really goes to show what appetite there is. And this is about saying that we can think about our city in a different way, and that if we use reduce car use, especially the toxic sort of petrol and diesel car use, and use appropriate journeys for appropriate appropriate vehicles for appropriate journeys, then all our lives will be greener and healthier and more pleasant.
No, thank you for that. And that will give us a great source of, or give yourselves, and we could all be able to access that, a great source of data. How does the GLA use the Breathe London network data? Is any other monitoring being conducted outside of this? I'm not talking about this in return to Car Free Day, but generally.
Yeah.
What are some of the most surprising findings from these data, and how are you responding to it throughout the policy cycle? So again, I'm asking you, take it up, Tony. Have you been surprised?
I'm surprised by the interest in it, and I think that's really witness to how many people really understand how important the environment is and really want the mayor and the government, businesses, all of us to do more about air pollution. So, you'll know there are many campaigners working on this agenda. And the Breathe London project, I should say, is a new innovative project that we are trialling these new hyperlocal monitoring sensors, and look, there are also some on backpacks and so on that we're testing out new technology. We have a very well established and probably world leading air quality network of fixed monitoring stations that they're the ones that are used to measure the reduction in emissions and the reduction in concentrations, and that's what we use for formal monitoring and reporting against our progress on legal limits. What that didn't do, because it was fixed and not giving us coverage across London, was that you didn't really understand what was happening at real time. What, for example, a car-free day might do for changing in air pollution. We wanted to get bigger coverage by going down an approach with the Breathe London network and this hyperlocal monitoring. We've also got some monitors in a Google car. So as they're doing their mapping for their purposes, we've got a camera in there or equipment in there that is measuring air pollution. So we'll get a much better sense of where are the hotspots of pollution that you might not be able to get and understand from a fixed monitoring station that's in one place. You're getting a much detailed hyperlocal picture of where that is. And we're starting to see some of that data coming through on the website, Breathe on the website. But it's too soon, I think, to really get a picture. You really need at least 6 months, if not a year's worth of data to really take any strong conclusions and draw policy recommendations out of that. But in terms of the surprise, I think I'm surprised about how well it's going. How people really like it and want monitors. You know, lots of people want to see monitors, and you know, and I think what I'm really hoping is this is going to help other cities who don't have the benefit of our extensive network, because they're a lot cheaper to operate. So I think, it's, as I said, too early to say. There's some data coming through that gives you little hotspot information that's really helpful.
That's good. I mean, this committee looked at the monitoring trial that you just referred to, using backpacks by, I think, 250 school children. Is it 250 schools or 250 children? Children. That's sort of like 6 months on. Anything coming from there?
I think
that was a snapshot in time, but there's a new, as Shirley mentioned, there's a new wearables study that we're doing. It's called Wearables because they wear a rucksack.
It was launched in March.
Yes, it was only only a limited time. So when we announced it, it was following the trial just to show what that might do, because it was trying to compare the air pollution a child might experience on their route to school and in school. So we've published that data. So that was a fixed study. We're doing another study, which is this other wearables.
Which will be coming out this year.
What are the wearables?
So that's the repeat. They're doing more with rucksack.
Right, more with
it's
rucksack.
New technology that King's College are trying.
A wider control group?
Yes, it's a different type of control group. I can send you details on it, but
yes, I'm sure.
It should be. I mean, it's going to be published this year anyway as a report. So.
Yeah, because going back, the only thing that I would just query about Saturday is, of course, a lot of the idling and pollution is about the journey to school that takes place Monday to Friday, so we won't capture that on the impact on the Saturday, but
we should see some, because there'll be some monitors there, won't they, in the city, in that sort of area.
For back to school.
Car-free day. No,
car-free day.
Yeah.
Sunday.
So there'll be
Sunday.
so there'll be some data from the stations that are already there, so you'll be able to give you an indication, but it won't give you the detailed level of data that, say, the Breathe London or the Rodrigues would give you.
I mean, I think that's given us a sense of the monitoring and measuring and the sharing of it. That's open sharing, isn't it? All this stuff goes to open source?
It goes onto the website, isn't it? On the Breathe London website.
The Green London.
Breathe London.
The Breathe London.
So if you go on the website and you look at one of the monitors and click on it, then you'll be able to just track sort of hour by hour, minute by minute almost the pollution levels, and you'd be able to see that it's sort of, I think the one I saw, you can see it's quite low as as people are getting up. Then you see the school run, and then there might be other spikes. You're trying to work out what that is. Was it an accident that caused people to sit there idling, or what?
And we've created a map on the GLA website as well, which takes into account the fixed monitoring stations as well. So it's all in one place, which we send to you.
And then you'll be adding to that data with the extra rollout of the electric bus fleet. And we can then be able to see where the bus fleets are, and then what the pollution level is clearly in
I think that's on it's a layer on that map, so that you can see the low emission bus zones. But we've already seen through the modelling and assessments that we've done a 90% reduction in NOx emissions from buses, just because of the retrofits, I think.
Yeah. And just lastly, are we anywhere nearer getting government to allow London to access the Clean Air Fund that my colleague spoke about earlier, or to give any more support for the electric buses? As coming out of the spending review, anything you can tell us about?
So £30 million was made available to DEFRA for air quality, which isn't a huge amount. We've asked whether we are able to access that funding, and I think we've been told unlikely, and we've made representations about that, because we are still barred from using that funding, because allegedly this was something that the previous mayor had agreed as part of the previous comprehensive spending review settlement, so as part of the sort of broader settlement. So we are arguing we are in a new comprehensive spending review period and that we should be able to access that funding. This was a 1-year funding round, and so we continue to make representations on that, and then also for future funding rounds that London should have its fair share of funding.
I mean, again to you, Chair, I mean, we're writing to the Prime Minister based on actions and promises he made when he was Mayor of London. I wonder if it's possible for this committee, for you to talk with other leaders, for us to make, a push about getting some of that money from this Clean Air Fund.
I don't see how it can have been part of a deal relating to anything that the previous mayor had done, because the Clean Air Fund was only launched after the government was taken to court 3 times, and they launched it very much more latterly, I thought. I mean, it's been launched well after the previous Prime Minister, the previous mayor became, it was after he stopped being the mayor and well before he became the Prime Minister. So I don't see how this relates to anything that he did. Who's told you that? That sounds mad.
Well,
that's the rationale the government have put forward to us is that the previous mayor agreed a settlement, sort of, as Shirley mentioned, it's like the £billions worth of settlement for London that captured a certain spending window in the last spending review. That ends next year. This Clean Air Fund was new money for other local authorities, but the previous mayor negotiated sufficient funding for air quality, as they have put it to us, as part of that review, so therefore no further money is required.
Yeah, Chair, stay with me, please. I'm willing to go with the expert. I'm a scrutineer, not an expert. I would like for you to consider, have a conversation and see if we as a committee can put any weight behind the ask. It's always worth adding an extra letter just to show, the GLA is at its best when the Mayor and the Assembly are working together.
Okay, well let's
I'll leave it with
take that away, and group leads can discuss it and pull something together. Is that you finished? Marvellous. Sean, you did say you had one thing you wanted to pick up on.
About the methodology behind this wearable study. I accept it's a bit early for data to make any sort of serious conclusions. But have we had a look at what are we trying to find out? That's my first question. What are we trying to find out?
With the wearables?
Yes, with that particular study.
Two things. One is, what the child's exposure is to air pollution and where the sources are. So on their routes to school, it's how much are they exposed to air pollution and at what levels. And then we can work out what the sources are. Is it traffic? Is it building related? Was there a construction site? So we start to get a picture of what are the key sources at a much more local level than we can get with the fixed monitoring stations that give you a picture, that we look at annually.
But here's where my first problem lies. That makes a huge assumption that the pollution you're exposed to is only traffic. My esteemed colleague Jeanette pointed out to me that I'm an asthmatic. By using a gas cooker, that's probably where I get most of my exposure. It feels very narrow.
I'm shocked that you didn't know that.
Well, I bow to a great experience. But
Can you get your question? Because
that's a direct question. I'm trying to understand what are we trying to find out, because that makes an assumption about traffic being the problem, and we all know traffic's a serious problem. But if we're doing a study about children and their exposure to poor air quality, surely we should be looking at the whole thing, not just the thing that actually we know the most about.
We are. So, as I said, it's to understand what the sources of emissions are on their route. So, like I said, it's not just traffic, it would be construction emissions as well. We're also looking at indoor pollution and what...
In the same study?
In a different study, and nursery audits, where we're trying to understand what the level of pollution a child is experiencing, both externally, but also in the classroom.
But that's my point. This study now, that's a study of traffic, it's not a study of children, if you're just looking at the one part of their experience, isn't it?
Well, you don't do one study to look at everything. You do a number of studies to understand what the sources are and to provide evidence and information to do further studies.
It isn't one study to look at everything. It's actually one very narrow study. My point is, if this is about children's health, and if they're wearing a monitor, surely we should be monitoring their activity, not just that very narrow part.
Which is what the wearables did, because that was also looking at what they were doing in their home, as I recall, and we published that data, so we understand that. But the biggest source of pollution, half the pollution, comes from transport and traffic related and from cars. So it is obvious that that's what you want to check.
But that's just the point, isn't it? We know that, and it's half. It's not the biggest. If I'm to take you, it's only half. So there's an equally big source elsewhere. So that's what we should.
But you don't understand. I was going to say, what you know is this is where the emissions are coming from. What you don't understand is, and what this is trying to measure, is their exposure and whether, for example, removing that source or getting, doing a different route, things like that. Are there car-free streets and measures that we might be able to implement that would help reduce their exposure?
If I can add, the half is a London-wide average as well. So when you get to the roadside, it's a much greater proportion coming from the traffic that's contributing to the high levels of NO2 at the roadsides. And that's the sort of thing we're seeing when children walk down a busy road. High levels of exposure to NO2, and the source of pollution is much greater at the roadside from traffic than it is maybe if you're in a park, for example.
Okay, I'll stop the chair because I know you're under pressure for time. I'm dissatisfied.
There's just one final thing on the ultra-low emission zone that I want to pick up on, which is I think that you're finding that compliance is higher than expected, and also it seems that TfL had modelled there being a stronger reduction in the number of vehicles in the ULEZ that's currently happening. Now, obviously, I understand you've got the problem that the way you're measuring the vehicles in the ULEZ is unique vehicle identities on a particular day, not how much each of those vehicles is driving around. But I'm just wondering, is there a risk that the modelled benefits to air pollution won't materialise because there are more cars driving around, and also because you've got higher compliance, do you need to do something like put the congestion charge up to actually reduce the number of vehicles in that zone?
I'd say it was too soon. We're 4 months into the ultra-low emission zone being implemented, and I think we need to take a little bit more time about understanding, ideally it would be a full year's worth of data, so you understand seasonality. At the beginning of the implementation period, we had the Extinction Rebellion strikes and so on. So, we haven't got a proper picture of that, so I wouldn't want to comment on whether we need to do other measures.
Yeah, it's worth noting that we have seen a reduction in the total number of vehicles being detected in the zone.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to green infrastructure, which is our final section, and we're going to start with some questions from Nikki.
Thank you. Just for clarification on the air quality, when you talk, can I just flip this in? When you talked about, it's just clarification, when you talked about monitoring the hotspots and more monitoring, what is the actual, are you using sensors or diffusion tubes? What is the
technology?
The technology.
It's sensors, isn't
it? Yeah, it's a new sensor that's been developed. So we're doing it in a consortium with Environmental Defence Fund Europe. So
could you send us information, please,
absolutely,
about the sensors and how many you've got, etc., where you're putting them, and who the partnership is? Thanks.
We could actually have if we can get members together, someone could actually talk us through...
Start of a meeting.
Yes. Something
briefing.
Like
that.
We can do a short briefing for you.
Briefing,
absolutely.
Okay. Thank you
very much. It's good to know that, because local people are very concerned, and it would be good to be able to report that back. On green infrastructure...
Nikki, we're just welcoming in Andrew Jones on green infrastructure to sit with Shirley.
All right, hello Andrew. Okay, ready?
Yes.
Just on green infrastructure then. First of all, I just wondered how progress is going on promoting the Mayor's pledges about increasing overall green, it's overall cover and tree cover and green infrastructure. So big first general question, and then on home in a bit.
Okay, so I think I said in the opening statement that we have made very good progress on a number of fronts. So London Plan, I'll start with the London Plan because I think that sort of sets the overarching framework in terms of planning policy, so continue to protect the green belt and sites of biodiversity importance and so on. We have policies in there, for example, on green roofs, and we're seeing huge progress on that, for example. We have now more green roofs per inhabitant than any other world city, other world cities, right, such as Washington or
Is that more green roofs than any other world city?
Then per inhabitant
In central London as
than
well.
some other, I should say, world cities. We've got a new urban greening factor policy that's going to be brought in, which is going to accelerate that sort of level of greening in new developments. We're rolling out a number of our funding programmes, so the Greener City Fund, which is £12 million of funding that the Mayor has made available. We've allocated £8 million worth of that funding to date, and we have a number of programmes underway. I mentioned that we planted around 175,000 trees, and we have another tree planting round this winter, which is obviously the tree planting season, so we're expected to see many more. And that's obviously just what the Mayor has funded. There are many others, trees that we're seeing going in from our partners and through developments. And then I should mention that we've been declared the world's first, confirmed as the world's first national park city because of those sorts of policies around protecting and enhancing our green infrastructure and very, very importantly is making sure that people, Londoners, access it, because we know that our green spaces are really helpful for our well-being, mental health, physical health, more generally.
Just remind us, what is the access metric?
There isn't an access metric, is there?
In terms of that, there's metrics within the London Plan about areas of deficiency and access to green space.
But Londoners have to be what, within?
Well, it varies
half
on
a kilometre?
It depends on the size of the space. So there's different standards depending on accessibilities to a space of a certain size.
Okay, and that exists?
Yeah, that's in the London Plan. That relates to areas of open space and areas of nature conservation. Right,
okay. Well, in that case then, can I just ask, what I understand is you've changed, I think, there've been changes, haven't there, in the overall increase in green cover compared with your benchmark, is that right? Does that mean you've changed the target?
We haven't changed our target, so we want to make more than 50% of London green. What we've done is done some more detailed evaluation of the green cover that exists in London. So we have a new baseline because we used aerial imagery that was provided by, I think it was Eurosatellites or something. So what that's shown is a range, because you have to take into account the sort of variations in the analysis of the imagery. But what that new data is saying that between 48 to 51% of London is green. And whilst that upper limit is over our target 50%, that doesn't mean we've achieved it and then we're going to stop there. We're just going to use the baseline, which is 48%, and that's what we'll be measuring ourselves against, but against both levels, obviously. And that baseline is pretty similar to the 47% that was the previous
yes, I remember cover. It was 47, so it's now 48. But you haven't got a target for where you want to get to?
More than 50%.
More than 50%? Overall then?
Yes.
You mean the range at the moment?
It's 48 to 51.
So you want 50% everywhere?
No, I don't think we can say 50% everywhere.
Well, no, I mean, if you look at 48 to 51%, you'd be looking for an increase in that when we measure it in the next time. So if you say it was 47% before, and to get over 50, we were wanting to ensure there's a certain level of the ambition would be ensure that 48 to 51% is higher in the future when we measure it again. So
okay, so it would be something like 49 to 52. Got it. Okay. And okay, I understand that.
I mean, it's a technicality in the way that, I mean, we've got much more accurate data. The methods we use is much more accurate, but the satellite imagery, so it means that you have to, there's some bits where you review it in one way and it's very good at picking up greening that we hadn't picked up before, but other bits it doesn't do, and then that's why we've ended up with the two different methods and combined them give us that range.
I just want to ask, because this aerial imagery that you do for monitoring, the next question is about tree cover. Does it actually pick out the trees from other things?
So the tree cover one, yes, does. I mean, it uses elevation data as well as just picking up the greening. So the tree cover, we did a separate exercise to measure the extent of tree cover, and that was refined to pick up the information on trees. And it's using aerial imaging. It's not just a visual, that's a tree. It uses infrared and other ways of establishing what the trees are. So we're pretty confident that it is picking.
So you're confident, and is tree cover, I understand, is increasing?
So the tree covering, the method we use, we believe, is to be more accurate than we've previously had before. Also, it enables us to hone in. The resolution means we can go in to particular areas and look at what that tree cover is, which we hadn't before, where it was just a global figure estimate for London as a whole. So the latest data came out with a figure of 21%.
Sorry, what percent?
21% tree cover. I mean, previously the figures...
Across all London this year?
Yeah, across all London. I mean, the previous estimates were 20%, so there has been that increase, but obviously it's a small increase, but important increase, but it's a better method, a more accurate method than we previously had in the past.
That's good to hear. How do you monitor tree loss? Because people get so exercised about...
So we're proposing to repeat that method every 5 years, because that will pick up statistical changes rather than it being a statistical artefact. So when you're measuring tree cover, obviously tree cover looks at what's there at that particular point in time. So it takes, if a tree's disappeared, that won't be measured. If a new tree's grown up and it's bigger, it'll pick up on that sort of thing. So by default, it's picking up the overall net change in terms of extent based on additional planting and tree loss.
But obviously it's got to be much more, this expression you used earlier, or somebody used, hyper-local. Obviously monitoring tree loss has to be done at that level. Is that happening?
Well,
because,
the information we have, you can start looking at where individual trees are, yes. But the thing about tree cover you've got to bear in mind is, you could plant a hectare of woodland and that's a hectare of new tree cover. But when you start planting trees in urban areas, you tend to plant smaller trees and their canopy develops over time. So the idea of picking up canopy is giving you a true reflection of what the extent of trees is over the time those trees develop. So smaller trees will provide more later down the line. So.
I get that. That's about new trees, though, isn't it? I'm just interested in this tree loss question. Having chaired for years and years planning committees and developers coming and absolutely, telling me, they were going to guard the roots of this tree and so on. When I go back to development, the trees are gone, and I am very concerned about. I think it's fantastic the work we're doing on trying to get more trees planted, but I just am worried about what we're doing about tree loss at the same time, and what we lose are mature trees. What we plant are small trees, and they will take years for us to get to where we need them to go. So I want to push a bit on this monitoring tree loss. There's street trees, but there are also trees within gardens and so on, within developments.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to necessarily push it now, but I want us to really, if you can, come back to us, because I think we need some initiatives, some more local initiatives, to do something about this. There's a lot of awareness now about trees. My other question on trees is that, I think we will get more, more collaboration around trees, because so many people are realising that trees are good, because they clean the air, they store water, they provide wildlife habitats, they store carbon, etc. And I think the more we get those messages out, the better it'll be. But we're planting more woodland, and are we now the agenda for the green belt? More and more people now are saying, England particularly has the lowest amount, I think, of tree cover of almost, I think, probably any European city, not city, but, England country. And we have a green belt, and we could be planting more woodland on that. Can you update us on what we're doing about planting on the green belt?
We've got part of the Green City Fund. We've got some funding to look at planting new woodland, and we have been working with a number of local authorities to understand where that might be possible, where there's space to do that, and also we have a number of boroughs that we're very close to making an announcement, but I wouldn't want to make that announcement just here because we're not quite ready.
Preempt your announcement. No. That's good.
Okay.
That's good to know. Are you going to say more? No. No, wait.
I mean,
wait for your announcement.
I mean, obviously, we did an exercise of trying to identify where we thought there were opportunities for woodland creation in the green belt. So looking at low-grade agricultural land,
brilliant,
how that was owned, and obviously one of the challenges of planting in greenbelt is a lot of opportunities are within private owned land. So that needs the agreement of the private owner to believe that that's the best use of their land in the longer term, and the incentives out there are through national schemes, agricultural land management systems.
It's interesting. Are we talking about? If the Archers can talk about agroforestry, I expect we can. Are we pushing agroforestry with farmers?
So, I mean, when you mean agroforestry,
planting trees between your crops and rewilding bits of your farm.
No, but I think one of the things and certainly some of the projects we've been looking at aren't, you might have a whole field and you might not plant the whole field with trees, but you might actually create woodland strips around your field, so those bits of land that are the least productive from an agricultural food perspective, you're starting to use that space for woodland planting. So some of the projects we've been looking at have been, it's not a solid block, it's more of
I do recommend you look at agroforestry because it's a different way of using trees, and it means you can get more trees on farmland to the benefit of the crops. I've learned all that from one episode of The Archers.
Right, okay.
Evidence-based scrutiny.
Well, there you go. I just happened to hear it one morning.
Are we going to bring coercive control in? Because that was a big theme for about 6 months.
Now, just to move on, the urban greening factor. At the examination...
I'm surprised at Nikki.
Can we be serious, please? The whole country listened to it. No, a lot of the country listened to it. I'm not saying I do all the time. I'm here. But at the examination in public of the London Plan, the Assembly argued to strengthen the urban greening factor to match Berlin. Now, and the inspector, Leonie and I were there, was extremely sympathetic to this. And knowing the ambition, big ambition for London to be a national park city, I'm just wondering, how are we going to respond? Are we going to strengthen the urban greening factor?
I was going to say that my understanding from Jules is now with the inspector to make a decision on the London Plan. So I think our ability to change anything is too late. So it's now with the inspector, the draft London Plan. So our ability to change that is now dependent on what the inspector comes back with. So at the moment, no, we can't do anything.
I think the inspector is sympathetic then?
Well, I think that's what we have to wait and see what his steer is. I mean, he could say, I don't agree with it. He could say, actually, it's very good and I want it to be stronger. So we will respond in the way what the inspector says about it. So that's how we have to deal with it at this point in the process of the preparation of the new London Plan.
Yeah, so fundamentally there hasn't been a lot of, we'd like to see this changed.
We put in a policy that we modelled and took a lot of, when we put it out into the consultation, we had a lot of feedback on it that is, groundbreaking. I think it goes much further than the government's biodiversity net gain metric, and really reflects what I think we think can be done in London and is cutting edge, I think. So the thing that we're focused on is trying to make sure that it remains in the draft London Plan. So we put a lot of effort, the team and the planning team, to make sure that the inspector has all the evidence to keep, to make sure that it remains a key feature of the London plan.
And I think, just to add to that, Nikki, I mean, at the London Plan inquiry, there were people who were opposed to it and said it was too strong, so we defended what we got in there. So hopefully that case was made strongly enough that it was appropriate at the levels that was done, and if they can go further and he thinks they're a good idea, then he will reflect that in his response.
Okay, all right. Well, let's wait and see. So, okay, so we've got these obligations on developers to honour, to make sure they meet the urban greening factor. Say, let's take one thing. Say they don't meet biodiversity, they don't fulfil the biodiversity requirements on site. Isn't it a get out of jail free card to say that they can do it off site? And how will you monitor them doing it off site? I mean, it's almost worse than the tree thing.
So, in terms of the urban greening factor, they will be, I mean, it will be done they will determine what, based on the nature of the site, how that urban greening factor is applied and what benefits it delivers. So biodiversity may be one area of activity, but I mean, and that also is based on what the existing value of the site is. So it may be very low in biodiversity, it may be very high in biodiversity, and how you apply the urban greening factor will take that into account in terms of the way you deliver it. I mean, in terms of the London Plan, it hasn't changed the Sorry.
I don't think that's right. Sorry, Andrew, to interrupt you, but I mean the net biodiversity gain will reflect back to the quality of the biodiversity on the site when it first falls in.
But that's what I'm saying.
But not the UGF. That's actually a factor that is separated from the original state of the site.
Yes, but the urban greening factor. So there will be an expectation to do net biodiversity gain, but obviously the scale of net biodiversity gain will determine by the existing value of the site. The urban greening factor will deliver an element of greening, and some of that will be of the two things don't work exclusively of each other; they work together.
So because I thought maybe I muddled it when I was listening to Leonie, but in fact they do work together then. So that so the net biodiversity gain. So it allows you to put biodiversity off-site.
So in terms of the way you deal with biodiversity, the hierarchy in terms of the way that you deal with biodiversity on a site will be about, can you avoid the impact on it? There's a traditional hierarchy. If you can't avoid it, how can you mitigate it? If you can't mitigate it, how do you compensate it? And when you get onto the level of compensation, can you do it on site or not, or elsewhere? And that's when so it has to go through that hierarchy. Nothing's changed from that. So all it is providing you with an alternative option at the end of the hierarchy, because some schemes may never be able to deliver something on site. So it's a mechanism to ensure that you look at how you might be able to deliver it off site. At the moment, we're looking at guidance in terms of how that will work in London, and we'll be publishing.
Oh, that's interesting, because I think local authorities are going to need guidance on this. And they're going to need, I'm just so interested in how we're going to monitor this. I mean, I think we'll have to have lots of champions or something. I don't know how we're going to know whether it's been provided off-site.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be down to the local planning authorities to monitor what's provisioned, but it would be part of a condition or an arrangement at the planning decision level.
So it's a condition, so you can read it and you can check it up and follow it, I suppose.
Yeah.
If you're a very keen local.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and there's just a final question. The SPGs, which are promised, you've got a number of SPGs coming out. The Green Grid one, geodiversity. Are there others that you're going to do?
I mean, there's a suite of SPGs under the existing plan. I think the London Plan team, as I know, are reviewing which ones they take forward. Obviously, there were particular commitments made in the new London Plan. So, as you've mentioned, the All London Green Grid is one we're currently scoping out the content of that and the approach it will take, and that would be published post the new London Plan. I haven't got the full list in front of me, and that would be something we'd need to pick up with the London Plan team in terms of what they plan to publish in the future.
Okay. Do you think you could, again, lots of things you're going to provide through the chair, could you provide a list of the SPGs that have been pledged, and then what perhaps your priorities are?
Priorities in terms of priorities in terms of the ones that
which
we've
ones
pledged.
you're going to want tackled first?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, well, we can certainly talk with the London Plan team and ask them to provide a list, and
we'll come back.
Yeah.
It'd be good to have. Thank you.
Very good, thank you, Nikki. Can I bring in Sean for our final?
What progress has been made on the portal that will house information on green spaces in London? When can we expect it to go live?
I think it is live, isn't it? I'm just trying to find the question so I could point to the website.
So I think
there we are. 146. Sorry. Yep. So the web portal is live on the web, www.goparks.london, and that's signposting information and data about London parks and green spaces. And then obviously we've produced a lot of data. We've talked about the tree canopy cover map, you know, the mapping that we've done, the air imagery, you know, so there's lots of data there, and there's lots of sort of layers you can intercut air quality data with, you know, what we're doing on green infrastructure data, so that's all just all there.
But I mean, that particular portal, I think last time you asked us about that, and there was a consortium led by CPRE who were putting an application through to the City Bridge Trust to develop the portal, and they were successful in getting that money, and that, as I said, as Shirley said, that portal is now up and running, so there's information on there in terms of where green spaces are, what events are going on in some of those green spaces, so there's a live portal.
Two short questions. Is there a mechanism for it to be updated? I imagine there is, but
So, as I understand, the project's got 3 years of funding, so they will be, as they develop it and further, they'll obviously be maintaining it over that period of time and having to look at how that is maintained beyond the current funding that they've received.
It's nothing worse than that out-of-date portal. What sort of traction has it had? Are they able to get out there, the public are aware of it? Even I didn't know it was live. My notes didn't know it was live.
It's quite new.
I mean, it's relatively, obviously.
How new?
I think it's probably gone live in the last couple of months. So certainly was live when I had looked at it the other day, but certainly we will be promoting it on our website.
Okay. Just slightly different question. What progress has been made on finding innovative ways of resourcing solutions, you know, around providing green space, around making it more accessible? One of the big challenges is I live on the Ring of London. We are excited about our green space, always want to protect it, but lots of it we can't access. And often the conversation comes around funding. So is there any conversations being had about innovative ways to open up green spaces?
Yeah, so that's really the work, the role for the London Green Spaces Commission, which we've been taking evidence over the last few months, really, from a number of stakeholders interested in green spaces, and accessibility is one element of that. So from local authorities, from you know, organisations that work in parks, from community groups, about what the issues are and what different business models there might be out there. So part of the and we're looking at obviously what's happening internationally as well. So that the report is going to be looking at what might be different business models that make sure that the public realm, those public green spaces, still remain public, and that, you know, they are able to, you know, in the time of sort of local authority funding and austerity funding, ways of making sure they're maintained and enhanced.
Sorry.
And I was just going to add that the Greener City Fund, obviously the projects we fund through that, they are developed by a multitude of community groups who are looking to not just establish new spaces but renovate spaces and open up to the public. So, I mean, just we've opened up 10 community woodlands, 3 new woodlands, there's Greening School playgrounds, 29 community gardens. So those are, and those are driven by the communities, not us. We're supporting those projects. So those are where communities working in their local area to find a way to improve and open up those spaces. So that fund is providing an excellent opportunity for local people to tackle it themselves and design it and implement something in terms of what they want.
I know the GLA and Camden and Islington did some work around securing investment for local parks and the like. I'd like to hear about any learnings from that project.
So they've only just secured that funding. It was national funding. So as part of the Green Spaces Commission, they're feeding their experience in, and we're working with them to understand what the lessons might be. We've also got European funding to look at sort of greening part of the Thamesmead estate as part of a project called Clever Cities. I think we've got about £1 million.
About
£2
million
worth of working with
the project,
and working with the Peabody estate to look at how you might start to reintegrate green infrastructure into that sort of quite. I mean, it's a beautiful sort of lakeside area, but it's not very accessible to the people living on the estate. So how do you make it more green and more accessible?
I think the final question I'd ask is, what is the spread between inner and outer London? We have on the outside of London great green spaces. People are very passionate about them, but I don't sense the same level of activity, and correct me if I'm wrong, around doing innovative things to get access to that. Are you helping local councils on the fringes of London access the green space they have? Because traditionally there tends to be more of it. So is there work there being done?
Well, our funding is open to all, and I think we've got a good spread of funding of projects for both inner and outer London. And as Andrew said, that's more often than not driven by the communities themselves, either coming forward projects themselves or with their local authorities. And we've got some signature projects, the sort of big, the 15 or so projects, Beckenham Place Park being one of them, but we've been doing some work out in Ealing as well to open up and make connectivity in green spaces to allow people to make more use of them, get on their bikes and walk and so on, as well as the smaller areas, as I said, near schools and so on. I think we've got that's all mapped as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you can find the information about all the projects on the website. I mean, as Shirley said, there's our Greener City Fund has been split into various grant strands, and there were some bigger pots of money and smaller pots of money. The smaller pots of money, they're concentrated across London as a whole, so there are some in the outer London, but the largest sums of money tended to be in the outer London. So, as Shirley said, there's Beckenham Place Park, and there were 6 of those projects funded, where there's a larger investment went in, and they've taken a couple of years to develop and be finished at the end of this mayoral term. So.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing is, I mean, we've talked about the woodland creation opportunities in the green belt. One of the factors about those, the way we're also in part of their raison d'etre would be to improve access to those spaces as well. So not just about creating the woodland, but making them more accessible.
It's a plea as much as anything else, because we are either on the outskirts. We love our green spaces, but there's such good ones. Some of them you can't access. You physically can't. Some you can't access. You don't know they're there, and they become a bit of a secret. And you need someone to sort of,
That's exactly what the National Park City Festival was about. It was to try and get people to understand that on their doorsteps, they may not have known about it, but there are places that you can go, and they're open, So, some of the cemeteries that you can go into, which are, beautiful green spaces for wandering around and just getting a bit of reflection time, or the green belt, or just local sort of hidden parts that you didn't know about. So part of that was getting the community out there, telling their fellow community members, we're here and this space is here, and the local authorities and so on. And it was a very successful event. I think we want to do more of that. The portal, as we talked about, the events the boroughs are doing, more signposting. It's not enough just to provide or maintain and protect the spaces, but it's actually the accessibility point is getting people, all Londoners, out there.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add some of that from the festival, I mean, we engage over 90,000 Londoners. And often people only want to go to spaces when there's something going on, because they might be a bit intimidated to go there with no one else or don't know the spaces. But I mean, some of the stats we've got were the first festival introduced people to new outdoor space, over a third were visiting the space where the event was taking place for the first time, and over half those indicated they would come back. So there were some very good stats in terms of it achieving its objectives of getting people to go out to spaces they hadn't been to before.
Okay, thank you. Chair, I think Nikki covered most of these sections, so I think we're done there. Thank you.
Thank Thank you very much. Thank you for answers to everything. We will follow up. I think there's a massive list of follow-up things.
Yeah.
So we will make sure that we are in dialogue on that. So thank you very much. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the subsequent discussion?
Noted.
And to delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the discussion.
Agreed.
And can I ask the committee to note the progress on its work programme and the topics agreed by the GLA Oversight Committee on the 1st of July 2019 for its meetings from July to October 2019.
Noted.
And the next meeting of the committee is scheduled for the 10th of October 2019 at 10 a.m. in the chamber in City Hall. There are no items of urgent business and the meeting is over. Thank you very much indeed.